Joke Soya was supposed to die. Discarded by the Vermilion Bird clan after being exposed as a fake daughter, her execution was certain. But fate is funny. If you ask me, getting kidnapped was her best-case scenario. When her life seemed over, a terrifying stranger stole her away. The little girl finally blinks her vibrant pink eyes open, greeted by hushed, excited whispers. "Father, she's so tiny," a young boy marvels. An older brother quickly shushes him, warning that if he breathes too hard, the fragile child might just blow away. Bolting upright in a panic, Soya finds herself surrounded by a family of striking, silver-haired strangers. Did this actually happen? The famously ferocious patriarch of the White Tiger clan just offers a gentle smile. He casually reminds his bewildered captive that he snatched her from death. To understand how insane kidnapping is, you have to look at the Taiwa kingdom. This expansive territory is populated entirely by beastkin. While an imperial family technically rules from the throne, they aren't the ones holding the real authority. That power belongs to the 4 great clans, families who inherited the blood of ancient divine beasts to protect the realm. The east is guarded by the azure dragon, while the west is ruthlessly defended by the white tiger. The north is held by the black tortoise, and the south has always belonged to the vermilion bird. Soya's entire world just flipped upside down. She went from being the South's hated imposter to the West's newest obsession. Life in the White Tiger territory is quite an adjustment. Rumors fly through the Grand Palace corridors faster than a startled bird. Servants whisper in absolute disbelief as their famously fearsome lord refuses to let the tiny girl out of his arms. He carries her down the courtyard steps like she's made of fragile glass. Honestly, I can't blame him for doting on her. Surrounded by her new family, with her adoptive father and older brother beaming with pride, Soya happily gathers her courage. This genuine warmth is a stark contrast to her deeply painful history. Back when she was known as the treasured youngest child of the Vermilion Bird clan, she faced her first awakening ceremony. The earnest 6-year-old desperately prayed to inherit her family's magnificent red plumage, but the universe possessed a rather cruel sense of humor. Instead of a majestic, fiery creature, she transformed into a tiny, round cotton ball. Her snowy white fluff sent sudden shockwaves through the southern clan's noble elders. A true heir of the South should never lack crimson feathers. That devastating visual proof swiftly dragged up long-buried, sinister whispers from the day she was brought into the world. The exact moment Soya drew her first breath, her mother tragically passed away. That unfortunate timing left a lone midwife as the sole witness to her arrival. Now, nervous maids share hushed, terrified questions in the shadows of the estate. What exactly did that midwife see? When little Soya was born with a head of snow-white hair, the terrified midwife immediately suggested a swapped baby or worse, infidelity. But her father, Jeokya-yoon, furiously shut down those vicious accusations. He fiercely defended his late wife's honor, mourning her sudden passing right there in the delivery room. You see, in Beastkin society, absolute authority relies entirely on pure ancestry. The direct descendants of the 4 divine beasts possess overwhelmingly dominant traits, effortlessly passing down their ancient world-shaping magic from generation to generation. To protect that primary lineage, a spouse's lesser blood is magically sealed away upon marriage. Ye-yoon simply assumed his daughter's unusual coloring was a harmless, dormant quirk from her mother's side. He held the fragile infant with absolute devotion, desperately trusting that her first transformation would finally silence the gossiping nobles. He confidently expected her to spread brilliant crimson wings and prove she belonged to the fiery South. Instead, a tiny, helpless white chick chirped up at his boots. A harsh wave of energy violently sends the tiny bird skidding across the stone floor. The very man who once protected her with his life now stares down in absolute, unyielding disgust. How could a father betray his own flesh and blood? As nervous servants whisper in the shadows, Ye-yoon issues a chilling, irreversible command. He coldly orders his guards to rip out her spirit core and abandon the fake child to rot in the freezing ruins of the cold palace. Following his horrific command, Ye-yoon furiously silences the courtyard, threatening terrible consequences for anyone who dares speak of this visual disaster. The patriarch's rage is suffocating. Meanwhile, little Soya is completely bewildered by the sudden shift in tone. Staring down at her snowy fluff, the tiny bird innocently wonders if she somehow failed her awakening. Desperate for comfort, she calls out to her older brother, Hawaii. Surely he can fix this terrifying mistake. But Huayu is more than willing to carry out their father's sentence. Instead of offering a warm embrace, he cruelly snatches the small bird, ruthlessly extracting her glowing spirit core. The agonizing theft forces Soya right back into her fragile human form. Collapsed on the cold stone floor, she tearfully begs him for just one more chance. But Hawaii simply glares down with utter disgust. He coldly demands she never call him family again, bitterly accusing the crying child of deceiving them all. How can they be so heartless to a baby? His final words cut deeper than the physical pain. He threatens to personally tear off her pathetic white wings if she ever shows her face again. Just like that, the once treasured daughter is dragged away to the desolate, cold palace. Left completely alone in the freezing darkness, the little girl clutches a single fallen feather. She doesn't blame her family for their abuse. Instead, she tightly closes her eyes and prays, desperately hoping that if she just tries hard enough, she might finally bloom into the red bird they wanted. Despite being stripped of her magic, the desperate child refuses to give up. She forces her fragile human body through agonizing, incomplete transformations, clinging to one foolish hope. If she can just produce those crimson feathers, maybe her father will smile at her again. But without a spirit core, the immense strain only results in violent coughing fits and pools of blood on the cold floor. Even as she destroys herself from the inside out, the world outside her freezing prison offers no sympathy. It actually makes you sick to see adults act this way. Passing servants openly mock the fallen noble, sneering at her snowy white hair. The vicious gossip spreads unchecked through the estate. They whisper that her late mother must have been unfaithful, wondering why she hasn't been kicked out yet. Lying paralyzed in the freezing dark, the terrible truth finally sinks in. The little girl stares blankly at the ceiling as her heart shatters. She was never his real daughter. 3 grueling years pass in the shadows of the cold palace. The once pampered child has been reduced to a ragged servant, hauling heavy wooden tubs of laundry until her small hands blister. By now, the entire estate has completely forgotten that the Vermilion Bird clan ever had a beloved youngest lady. Her old life is nothing more than a ghost, anchored only by a single red feather she keeps hidden away. But just as Soya accepts her miserable fate in the dirt, a vibrant flash of color suddenly invades her dreary world. A new girl with brilliant fiery red hair steps into the spotlight, proudly introducing herself as Riri. As Huayu proudly presents this true daughter to the gathered estate, Soya watches quietly from the sidelines. Her former family has officially replaced her forever. Standing nervously before the imposing estate, the small girl finally speaks up. She introduces herself as Riri. Trembling slightly, she presents a single, glowing red feather. She explains that a recent transformation revealed her true heritage. Huayu stares down at the undeniable artifact in his hand, his mind racing. Riri tells him that locals recognized the brilliant plumage and directed her straight to this very courtyard to find her real family. Skepticism still hangs heavy in the air. If the feather is truly hers, Huayu asks why she hasn't just shifted forms to prove it outright. Desperate for acceptance, Riri clenches her little fists and insists she can. She forces her small body to channel her dormant spiritual energy. A blinding burst of white smoke engulfs the courtyard. Huayu freezes, his breath catching in his throat as the heavy veil of magic begins to dissipate. Resting quietly on the stone tiles is a tiny, perfectly formed red bird. The surrounding clan members immediately break into hushed whispers of awe. You really can't fake that kind of transformation. There is absolutely no denying her direct Vermilion Bird bloodline now, but the miraculous moment shatters in an instant. The tiny creature shakes violently before reverting to a human with a sudden pop. Huayu drops to his knees, catching the frail child. Could their long-lost sister really be this weak? Gasping for air, Riri tearfully admits the heartbreaking truth about her dangerously underdeveloped spirit core. Severe, untreated illnesses during her early childhood left her body entirely too frail to handle the massive strain of shifting. Tears spill down her pale cheeks as she apologizes for being defective. Heartbroken by her confession, Hwayu pulls her into a fierce embrace. He shoulders all the blame, completely devastated that he didn't recognize his sister sooner. A week later, the Vermilion Bird clan has completely transformed around their real daughter. Riri easily wins over her new father and brother, soaking up the lavish praise and affection she was denied for so long. Does she already know how much power she holds? She's finally exactly where she belongs, but her arrival comes at a steep price for the one who was replaced. The discarded fake daughter has been stripped of her status and reduced to a lowly worker. Hauling heavy laundry across the courtyard, Soya silently watches Riri live the perfect, pampered life that used to be hers. I'd be absolutely furious in her shoes. But the peaceful moment shatters when the clan's older sister spots the ragged child. She immediately pinches her nose in open disgust, loudly complaining about the little servant's unbearable stench. Humiliated by the cruel remarks, Soya can only bow her head to hide her burning cheeks. Just as Patriarch Jeokya-yoon tries to guide his precious daughter away from the filth, Riri plants her feet. Pointing directly at the trembling girl, she makes a shocking demand. I want that child by my side. Please let her be my personal servant. The older sister immediately protests the ridiculous idea, insisting the frail worker is entirely too small to be of any use. But Riri refuses to back down. She cheerfully argues that a good scrubbing is all the little servant needs to fix her terrible smell. Unwilling to deny his true daughter anything, the fearsome patriarch instantly folds. Fine, do as you wish. I will give you whatever you want. Silencing his eldest daughter's frantic objections with a sharp gesture, he happily indulges Riri's whim. Just like that, the discarded imposter is permanently leashed to the real heir. Are you really that happy? Patriarch Jeokya-yoon asks, watching Riri beam beside her trembling new playmate. When Riri innocently confesses that she never had a single friend while living on the streets, the casual admission strikes a raw, agonizing nerve. He can barely hide his fury over her stolen childhood. Unable to bear the thought of her past suffering, he forces a gentle tone and asks Riri to step out for a moment. As the heavy doors click shut behind his true heir, the room's atmosphere turns instantly suffocating. He turns his cold, unforgiving gaze onto the discarded child. He doesn't mince words. Vicious rumors claim that Soya's biological mother, a lowly maid, intentionally swapped the infants at birth. For years, this tiny imposter thrived in luxury while his real flesh and blood was left to starve in the gutters. Honestly, it's completely unfair to blame a helpless child for that. His eyes flash with dangerous intensity as he coldly declares he will indulge his precious daughter's every whim. The harsh decree cuts Soya to the core. The man who once held her with such tender love now looks at her like utter trash. She means nothing to him anymore. Turning his back on her silent tears, the patriarch delivers a final, chilling warning. She is strictly forbidden from revealing her identity to Riri. If Riri ever gets hurt because of you, I will never forgive you. Heartbroken, the little girl weakly accepts her grim reality. A grueling month passes under this cruel dynamic. Today is Riri's 9th birthday, and the estate is practically overflowing with lavishly wrapped gifts. As maids pamper the true heir, excited whispers fill the room about an impending royal marriage proposal. Will she truly become the Golden Dragon's bride? As her personal maids fuss over her reflection, Riri coyly doubts if she is truly worthy of becoming the Golden Dragon's bride. Her attendants immediately dismiss the nonsense, fawning over her brilliant red and gold hair. They loudly declare that such a flawless hue is absolute proof of her direct lineage, something a pathetic impostor could never even hope to imitate. Wanting to twist the knife, an attendant calls back to the tiny servant, struggling under a massive mountain of wrapped gifts. They cruelly demand the discarded daughter's opinion on the real heir's perfect looks. Forced to swallow her pride, a trembling Soya quietly murmurs that her replacement is truly beautiful. Later that afternoon, the estate's grand gates swing open to welcome an ornate imperial palanquin. Escorted by the fearsome patriarch himself, the 5th prince of the Taiwa kingdom, Jae-irim, steps into the sunlit courtyard. Eager to secure her rumored royal match, Riri instantly steps forward with a picture-perfect smile to formally welcome the boy to her lands. Hidden away among the estate's lowly workers, Sokya watches the grand spectacle from the shadows. Taking in the boy's shimmering blonde hair and striking features, she can't help but marvel at the young royal's breathtaking appearance. Honestly, I don't blame her for staring. But as the polite family greetings continue, something completely unexpected happens. The prince's piercing gaze drifts right past the beaming vermilion bird heir and cuts through the crowd. His bright eyes lock squarely onto the little white-haired maid standing quietly in the back. Does he already know who she is? Before Soya can process the intense, unbroken eye contact, a jealous older servant roughly shoves her head down. Humiliated once again, the tiny worker is forced into a deep bow as her coworker scoffs under her breath. The bitter maid naturally assumes the discarded fake is desperately trying to flirt her way out of the laundry detail. Vicious whispers immediately surround the trembling child. The older maids cruelly scoff that stealing Riri's lavish life wasn't enough. Now the impostor is after the prince too. Completely trapped beneath their unforgiving glares, a helpless Soya can only squeeze her eyes shut and silently endure the crushing humiliation. "Please, open the door!" Soya pounds frantically against the heavy wood, but her desperate pleas only echo in the empty hall. The cruel guards order her to stay locked in the dark. Outside, the estate's gossiping maids cruelly sneer that a discarded fake daughter shouldn't dare try to curry favor with royalty. Seriously, the audacity of these servants is genuinely infuriating. Left completely alone, the little girl can only cry in silence. As hours bleed deep into the night, the chill of the storage room becomes suffocating. Her stomach growls loudly, a harsh physical reminder that she hasn't eaten a single thing all day. Huddled on the cold floor, she realizes a bitter truth. No one even knows she vanished. Back then and now, there is absolutely no one who would bother to look for her. But suddenly, rushed footsteps and a frantic voice shatter the stillness. "Soya, where are you?" Her head snaps up, eyes wide with fresh tears. Has someone actually come? The heavy door slowly swings open. A tall figure steps inside, panting softly as if he's been searching the entire vermilion bird estate. "There you are," he breathes, his tense expression melting into a gentle, relieved smile. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Soya freezes on the spot. Why is His Imperial Highness, Prince Heir, standing in a dusty storeroom? As he gracefully kneels beside her in the dust, she flinches back in confusion. How did he find her, and how does he know her name? Heir simply pulls out a delicate pink-gemmed tassel. "Even if I return this, you still wouldn't remember me." The moment she sees it, absolute recognition floods her mind. That specific ornament holds the key to a forgotten bond, swiftly pulling her memory back exactly 3 years into the past. The forgotten memory floods her mind, pulling her exactly 3 years into the past. During a tense visit to the imperial palace, little Soya had wandered off and stumbled upon a quiet, secluded courtyard. There, she found a young boy named Heir. He was weeping entirely alone in the garden, desperately grieving the recent death of his mother. Seeing his profound sorrow, the tender-hearted little girl immediately wanted to help. She pulled out her most treasured possession, a delicate pink-gemmed tassel left behind by her own late mother. She gently pressed the beautiful ornament into his trembling hands, sincerely hoping it would bring him the same warm comfort it always brought her. Shocked by the sudden gift, the young boy hesitated. How could he take something so incredibly precious from a stranger? But Soya just smiled brightly. "I'll lend this to you," she insisted sweetly. "When you're no longer sad and feel better, please return it." Deeply moved, Heir softly agreed. The two children sealed their newly forged bond with a solemn pinky promise under the fragrant spring blossoms. Who could have guessed that a simple childhood vow would completely alter both of their fates? The distant past snaps sharply back to the present. Blinking up at the towering prince in the dark storeroom, Soya finally connects all the dots. The grieving boy from the palace garden was His Highness all along. Honestly, keeping a childhood promise for 3 whole years is genuinely romantic. Heir gazes softly at the stunned girl, his tense shoulders finally relaxing. He confesses he was terrified of being too late, but he desperately needed to find her before midnight. "Happy birthday, Soya," he whispers gently, his voice full of quiet devotion, clutching the return tassel tightly to her chest. Soya is struck by a heartbreaking realization. Amidst the estate's lavish preparations for the true daughter's birthday celebration, she had completely forgotten that today was her own birthday, too. Overwhelmed that someone actually remembered her on this miserable day, she bursts into happy tears and hastily apologizes. Wiping her wet cheeks, she flashes him a brilliantly warm smile and sincerely thanks His Highness for coming all this way to find her. The prince gently chides her formal tone, insisting she just call him Brother Rim like she used to in the past. Then, staring closely at her worn servant's clothes, his expression tightens as he softly demands to know what ruined her life. Huddled together in the freezing storage room, Soya bravely pours out the entire tragic saga of her sudden beast transformation and her family's brutal rejection. As he carefully pieces the timeline of her awakening together, Jae-irim freezes in sharp, undeniable disbelief. Could her supposed crime actually be a massive, orchestrated lie? Urgently declaring he must rush back to the imperial palace to verify this crucial suspicion, the prince quickly kneels back down when her face falls in disappointment. He extends his pinky with a solemn vow to return soon, promising to take her far away to live at the palace. Honestly, she should just leave this wretched estate with him right now. Lurking outside the storeroom in the dark, the true daughter Riri spies on their life-changing reunion through the barred window in seething, absolute fury. How dare a filthy, discarded impostor use some cheap trick to seduce a royal prince? Her deeply ingrained, instinctive hatred for the fake sister violently boils over, guaranteeing she won't let Soya see without a fight. Riri's deep, bitter jealousy refuses to die. Even while dressed in rags and forced to scrub floors, Soya somehow still draws their father and brother's lingering glances. That subtle attention fuels the true daughter's bottomless resentment. To crush any remaining affection, she deliberately made the discarded child her personal plaything to keep her subjugated. But overhearing the prince's secret vow in the dark storeroom ruined everything. Riri refuses to let her escape. Panic mixing with malice, she fiercely resolves to drive the impostor out of the Vermilion Bird estate entirely before His Highness ever returns. Cornering the helpless child, she violently snatches away the precious pink tassel. Soya desperately begs for it back, but her vicious tormentor just smirks. Who would ever believe a filthy servant received a gift from royalty? It is genuinely infuriating to watch this relentless bullying. Suddenly, an older maid gasps in sharp recognition. That delicate ornament isn't a royal token at all, it is a sacred relic left behind by the clan's late madam. A horrific truth paralyzes the trembling little girl. Since she isn't blood, clinging to the only memory of her supposed mother technically makes her a common thief. Seizing this golden opportunity to play the victim, Riri shrieks in mock devastation. She loudly wails about the shameless fake stealing both her rightful place and her biological mother's sacred belongings. Then, with flawless dramatic timing, the true daughter collapses into a staged faint. Following that highly theatrical swoon, the entire household violently condemns the discarded impostor. Trembling with cold dread, Soya forces her heavy feet toward the lavish bedroom. She has zero choice but to kneel down and beg for mercy. How much more unearned punishment can one little girl possibly take? Inside the lavish bedroom, Riri plays the frail victim flawlessly. She weakly begs her doting family to get rid of the impostor, sobbing that she simply cannot live under the same sky as her fake sister. Standing entirely frozen just outside the paper partition, little Soya overhears every single vicious word. The crushing weight of their absolute, unyielding hatred finally shatters her young spirit completely. Where is a discarded child supposed to go now? Frozen outside the paper doors, Soya's entire world crumbles as she listens, in horror, to Huayu softly stroking the true daughter's hair. Readily yielding to Riri's desperate pleas, he promises that if the impostor causes even a fraction of distress, he will gladly wipe her from their sight. The absolute finality in his voice shatters whatever lingering hope she had kept hidden in her heart. Summoned to the Lotus Pavilion shortly after, she approaches her former brother with trembling steps, keeping her tired eyes firmly glued to the wooden floorboards. Preparing for her inevitable banishment, she knows exactly what this dreaded meeting is all about. He is finally going to carry out Riri's orders and cast her out of the Vermilion Bird clan forever. But the vicious eviction never comes, as Huayu instead confesses how deeply sorry he is for treating her so coldly. When she addresses him formally, he softly asks to be called her brother again. Honestly, He has a lot of nerve expecting that title back now. Adding to her utter confusion, he casually invites her to the summer festival's final night. Decades of neglect melt into a painful flashback of a kinder boy who promised to take her to the festival once she achieved her first beastification. Does he seriously think one sweet memory fixes all those years of abuse? Before she can fully process the whiplash, Hua-yu reaches inside his silk robes and produces a familiar glowing blue sphere. It is her stolen spirit core. He casually offers it back with an easy smile, pretending this is a genuine gesture of goodwill between them. As the magical orb sinks back into her chest, the miserable truth finally dawns on her. The brother who vehemently hated her beastifications isn't returning this to help her grow, but because he no longer cares if she succeeds. She is truly nothing to him anymore. Later that evening, the vibrant summer festival is in full swing, bursting with life. Hua-yu buys her a candied fruit skewer, gently urging her to take it when she hesitates. Panicking that a refusal might somehow anger him, she quickly accepts the sugary treat. While she nervously nibbles on the snack, he stops at a brightly lit jewelry stall to purchase a brilliant red gemstone bracelet for his true sister. The cheerful merchant completely misreads the tense mood, happily assuming the quiet girl standing beside him is the lucky recipient. Awkwardness settles heavily between them. To save face, Hua-yu hastily buys a simple pink beaded bracelet and offers it to So-ya. Instead of brightening up, she formally thanks him as the young master. He flinches. That distant title definitely stings. Honestly, what did he expect after years of treating her like dirt? A painful memory surfaces of a younger, happier So-ya, eagerly thanking him for remembering his promise to take her to this very festival. His jaw clenches tight as the weight of his past cruelty hangs in the air. As the sun dips below the lively paper lanterns, Hua-yu abruptly stops on a stone bridge. Refusing to meet her eyes, he tells her to wait right there while he runs a quick errand. Suddenly, a strange, overwhelming dizziness washes over the frail girl. The festive lights blur into a terrifying, shadowy illusion. A mysterious man in dark clothing appears before her eyes, bluntly declaring to an unseen figure that So-ya is dead. Is this a frightening premonition of her own grim fate? Hua-yu's crisp voice yanks her back to reality. Flashing a perfectly pleasant smile, he repeats his instruction for her to stay put. But as she looks up at his flawless facade, a chilling finality settles into her bones. He is lying. He has absolutely no intention of ever coming back for her. Watching Hua-yu's retreating figure disappear, So-ya bows formally, painfully accepting that this is the definitive moment of her abandonment. But the cruelty of his parting gift cuts deeper than just rejection. The candied fruit he bought was a peach, Riri's favorite snack. He completely forgot that even a single bite gives his former sister a severe throat-swelling, allergic reaction. Huddled alone on the dark stone bridge, the frail girl battles a dangerously high temperature. She tries to reassure herself that the agonizing sickness will pass after a few hours of quiet endurance. Yet a far more terrifying dilemma looms over her pounding head. With no home to return to and absolutely nothing to her name, how will she survive the night? A sudden, overwhelming survival instinct screams at her to run. Scrambling to her feet, the heavy, deliberate thud of approaching footsteps echoes across the pavement. Her breath hitches as a masked man in dark clothing emerges from the shadows, slowly drawing a lethal steel blade right before her eyes. It is the exact same ruthless figure from her earlier hallucination. A chilling realization crashes into her heart. That brief, terrifying scene wasn't just a trick of the festive lanterns, but a grim, accurate premonition of her own imminent murder. The horrifying puzzle finally clicks together as Hua-yu's vicious promise to the true daughter echoes in her memories. He didn't just leave her on this bridge to wander the kingdom as a beggar. The older brother she once trusted lured her out here to be quietly executed, permanently erasing the impostor from their family's sight. What an absolute monster. Just as the assassin prepares to deliver the fatal blow, a strange, frantic voice suddenly rings out in her head, desperately urging her to flee. She gazes up into the night sky in absolute bewilderment, wondering who on earth is trying to save her life. The frantic command echoing in her mind shatters her terrified paralysis. There is absolutely no time to figure out who is speaking to her right now. Survival is all that matters. Throwing herself into a desperate sprint, The sickly girl scrambles blindly through the dark festival streets, panting heavily as she flees. But her exhausted, feverish body simply cannot keep up the pace. Her shoe catches on a loose cobblestone, sending her crashing painfully onto the unforgiving pavement. As she hits the cold ground, the cheap pink bracelet Hawaii bought her completely shatters, scattering its beads into the dark shadows. A looming shadow instantly swallows her trembling frame. The masked assassin stands over his helpless prey, casually taunting the little rat he finally cornered. Raising his lethal blade high into the night air, he brings the heavy steel swinging down. Squeezing her eyes tightly shut, Soya braces for the agonizing sting of death. Instead of blinding pain, a deafening metallic crash rings out into the silence. The fatal blow never arrives. Confused and shaking, she cautiously opens one eye, bewildered to find herself completely unharmed. A tall, imposing figure with flowing silver hair stands firmly between her and the executioner. For a split second, her desperate heart thinks her father has finally come for her. But gazing up at the roaring spirit beast emblazoned across his dark robes, she realizes this stranger belongs to a totally different family. Turning to face the stunned imposter, the fierce swordsman fixes her with piercing blue eyes. It is the infamous patriarch of the White Tiger clan. Why would such a terrifyingly powerful man intervene in a quiet alleyway execution? Still, I highly doubt he is going to let that assassin finish the job. As the fearsome head of the White Tiger clan and the revered guardian beast of the West, Baek Sa-eon commands absolute respect. Yet, despite his overwhelming strength and fierce reputation, even a powerful patriarch like him still answers to a higher authority. Serving as a mentor to the frail fifth prince, Jae-irim, Sa-eon drops to one knee and gently urges the pale young man to rest. Instead, the ailing prince sits up and issues an unexpected royal command. He orders his master to leave the capital immediately and travel far into the southern lands of the Vermilion Bird. Why send him so far away? The prince's next instruction catches Sa-eon completely off guard. He must infiltrate their territory and steal their most precious treasure. In exchange for committing this brazen theft, Jae-irim promises to finally hand over the elusive dragon blood herb, said to bloom only in the very soil where a true dragon has spilled its blood. This legendary crimson flower is priceless. It remains the single known elixir capable of purifying a completely corrupted spirit core. Honestly, who could possibly walk away from a desperate deal like that? It is a strict condition Sa-eon simply cannot refuse. Arriving in the vibrant southern territory under the cover of night, the white-haired warrior ponders his vague mission. He naturally assumes the coveted item must be the Vermilion Bird's legendary black bow, a sacred relic passed down through generations of leaders. But was the grand treasure the prince spoke of truly just a simple martial weapon? Still harboring lingering doubts about the vague royal request, the patriarch scours the quiet rooftops. And that is exactly how he ends up dropping into a dark alleyway, casually dispatching a lethal assassin right in front of a terrified, discarded little girl. Glancing down at the lifeless assassin, Sa-eon's sharp gaze immediately locks onto the black bird tattoo inked across the man's pale cheek. It is the undeniable mark of the Samjako, an elite warrior faction directly serving the Vermilion Bird clan. A heavy frown creases the patriarch's face as he studies the dark alleyway. Why would such highly trained royal killers be deployed just to corner and execute a defenseless little girl? He turns his full attention back to the trembling child, collapsed on the cold stones. With her wide, tear-filled eyes and tiny, fragile stature, she looks absolutely harmless. Seriously, how could anyone want to hurt this little fluffball? Crouching down to her eye level, the imposing white-haired warrior casually checks if she is unharmed. He gently calls her a fluffball, clearly trying to soften his naturally intimidating presence. Gripping the dirt beneath her bruised little fingers, the discarded daughter bravely swallows back her lingering terror. She quietly stammers out a timid correction. "My name is Soya." A warm, deeply amused chuckle escapes the fearsome patriarch. Even her actual name sounds impossibly soft and sweet to him. But his gentle smile fades as he gestures toward the dead lackey bleeding out on the pavement. "What did you do to earn a grudge from those chicken heads?" The harsh reality finally shatters her fragile hope. Her own cruel family really did send someone to wipe her out. The crushing weight of that ultimate betrayal breaks her brave facade, and heavy tears begin streaming down her cheeks. Suddenly out of his element, the mighty guardian of the West freezes up in awkward panic. Taking a deep breath, he rests a large, reassuring hand on her silver hair. "I'll take you back to your family," he promises, completely unaware of the tragic irony. Wiping her lingering tears with a bruised sleeve, the fragile little girl shakes her silver head. When the intimidating patriarch gently assumes she must have simply run away from home, she quietly corrects his assumption. She bravely tells him that she doesn't have a family anymore. Her heartbreaking honesty leaves the normally unshakable warrior completely speechless. Staring down at her miserable state, Sa-eon immediately remembers the fifth prince's cryptic instruction. He was explicitly ordered to steal the South's most precious treasure. He still doesn't fully understand the royal command. Yet, looking at this discarded child in the shadows, he senses a heavy truth. She is deeply entangled with the Vermilion Bird clan. Without missing a beat, the fearsome guardian suddenly reaches down and effortlessly scoops the tiny girl into his broad arms. Since she has nowhere else to turn, he cheerfully decides to just steal her instead. It is a completely impulsive idea. But with a genuinely warm smile, he proudly declares that out of everything in this hostile territory, she is easily his favorite find. Staring up at his remarkably gentle expression, Soya's tiny heart aches with a familiar longing. Even after her so-called family viciously discarded her to die, she still desperately yearns to belong by someone's side. If she blindly takes this terrifying stranger's hand, could she actually survive the night? Honestly, what does she have left to lose? Gazing up at the imposing swordsman standing guard in the dark and bloody alleyway, the little fluffball makes her ultimate choice. She tightly clutches her worn clothes and tearfully begs the stranger to take her away. Satisfied with her bravery, the towering patriarch finally introduces himself as Baek Sa-eon, the absolute master of the West. Their wild, fateful journey has truly begun. To lighten the tense mood in the dark alleyway, Sa-eon jokingly demands she doesn't report him for kidnapping later. He gently sweeps the tiny, bruised girl up into his broad arms, ready to leave the hostile territory behind. But before they can even make a clean getaway, the heavy toll of her former family's cruelty finally catches up with her. Clutching her chest in sudden agony, the fragile fluffball collapses completely unconscious against the panicked patriarch. She is absolutely burning up. They soon arrive at the magnificent White Tiger estate far in the west. I swear, picturing this famously ferocious warrior carrying a tiny kid across an entire continent is just too precious. Tucked under thick blankets, she rests safely while Sa-eon sternly warns his youngest son, Yul, to be incredibly gentle. When her heavy eyelids finally flutter open, Soya finds herself surrounded by an entirely new, curious family. Staring up at the towering guardian standing over her bed, the bewildered girl slowly realizes he actually protected her for the entire journey. Before the estate's physician can thoroughly examine her, the terrified girl blurts out a quiet confession. She merely ate a peach, knowing full well her weakened body would violently reject it. Why would a starving child ever force herself to consume something so dangerous? The fearsome leader's sharp gaze darkens as he grasps just how desperate her daily survival back south truly was. Without a single second of hesitation, he loudly orders his staff to immediately dispose of every last peach in the entire estate. As his bewildered older son demands to know who this random child is, Sa-eon casually admits he just impulsively stole her. Trembling under their intense but warm stares, the little runaway bravely stammers out her name. With a deeply reassuring smile, her terrifying new kidnapper officially declares that this grand estate is her permanent home. Sitting quietly in her large new bed, the tiny runaway wonders what her future holds in this strange, unfamiliar place. Her little heart races with nervous anticipation. Deep within her chest, her shattered spirit core pulses with a faint, mysterious new light. Is she finally safe? Waking up in an unfamiliar, sunlit room, Soya is utterly startled to find two strangers beaming down at her bed. A warm, red-haired woman gently bows and quickly introduces herself as Yeonjong of the Red Fox clan. She promises to serve the little girl with absolute devotion. Stepping forward, a cheerful young man named San-ho of the Indigo Wolf clan gives a bright, welcoming smile. Standing side by side, the enthusiastic duo proudly announces that the clan head has personally assigned them to protect her. It is a whole new reality for our survivor. When they respectfully address her as young lady, she completely freezes in panic. How could they use such a noble title for her? Yeonjong kindly insists, "You are a guest of the clan head, so you are a young lady." Yet, Soya shrinks back. In her mind, that grand status strictly belongs to true daughters like Riri. Gripping her bedsheets, a heavy wave of anxiety washes over the tiny imposter. She recalls the fierce white tiger patriarch holding her securely, playfully warning, "It would be a disaster if rumors spread that I stole something." Her heart races with fresh worry. She absolutely refuses to become a nuisance to her imposing savior. Seeing her nervous hesitation, the overzealous servants dramatically beg for permission to fulfill their duties. They are terrified of insulting their master. Overwhelmed, she yields to a warm bath. She emerges looking so fluffy that they immediately declare her as cute as a white rice cake. Honestly, I could watch them dote on her all day. As Yeonjong gently brushes her damp silver hair, she distracts the anxious child with a history lesson. Outside the imperial family, only the 4 great clans are granted the prestige of ruling a palace. From the Azure Dragon's underwater fortress to the Black Tortoise's underground dwelling, each clan commands an awe-inspiring domain. As the wooden brush gently glides through her silver locks, a quiet pang of sorrow hits the discarded child. She vividly remembers the cruel vermilion bird patriarch, boasting that their grand southern estate was the absolute greatest in the world. But Yeonjong's cheerful voice pulls her right back to the present. The maid explains that the emperor himself acknowledges the white tiger's mighty domain as a true pinnacle of power. Soya blinks in absolute awe. The fierce man who rescued her really is the legendary ruler of this formidable clan. Suddenly, a tiny rustle at the threshold catches their attention. Peeking nervously through the wooden sliding doors is a familiar face, the little silver-haired boy who stood beside the patriarch yesterday. Yeonjong immediately spots him and warmly announces the arrival of the youngest young master. Without missing a beat, the enthusiastic servant dives back into her history lesson. She proudly explains that the clan has 3 young lords. The eldest, Ga-ya, is a battle-hardened prodigy who casually dozes off after returning from war, while the scholarly second brother, Ga-yoon, is always buried in ancient books. And that's the 3rd young master over there, secretly stealing glances at you. She playfully teases. Little Yule completely freezes. Knowing he is supposed to be sweating at sword training, the flustered boy panics and aggressively slams the doors shut. Kids are just so dramatic. The maid giggles at the hilariously adorable display. "It seems he wants to be friends, young lady." Soya points to herself in sheer disbelief. Does a true noble really want to play with a discarded fake? "That can't be," she whispers, her gaze dropping to her lap in shame. Yeonjong pauses her brushing. Why on earth would she think that? The gentle servant tilts a large, ornate mirror toward the deeply anxious child. "You're so cute," she warmly insists. Let's hope this timid little survivor finally starts seeing her own undeniable worth. Staring into the polished glass, the little girl is completely captivated by her adorable new dumpling bun hairstyle. Her cheeks flush with a shy nod of approval before her tiny hands ball into determined fists. She politely asks Yeonjong if they can go thank the mighty clan head. As they walk through the vast corridors, memories of his unexpected gentleness flood her mind. When her fever spiked the night before, the imposing patriarch had carried her himself. He warmly promised she was no burden, inviting her to stay for the time being. Those specific words echo loudly in her fragile heart. She is secretly relieved he didn't say forever, terrified of hoping for a permanent home she doesn't deserve. Still, leaning into the lingering memory of his warm embrace, she quietly prays this temporary sanctuary lasts just a little longer. Approaching the grand study, a tall, red-haired man intercepts them with a delightfully friendly smile. He cheerfully greets the tiny fluffball, introducing himself as Ho-jok-young, the patriarch's personal attendant. How many devoted servants does this eccentric family actually have? With perfectly practiced manners, the little survivor explains her earnest desire to thank her fearsome savior. Charmed by her absolute politeness, the attendant warmly asks her to wait outside the sliding doors while he announces her arrival. Inside the sunlit library, Lord Sa-eon lights up with an enthusiastic jigger the instant he hears his favorite little guest is at the door. But the little girl's breath catches in her throat. Standing right beside the beaming clan head is a very intimidating presence. It's the silver-haired young master from yesterday, and he fixes her with a piercing, icy stare. A dark, heavy tension radiates from his rigid posture, completely suffocating the room. Her fragile confidence shatters. I just know this poor kid is expecting the worst. He definitely hates her. Stepping tentatively into the sunlit study, the tiny survivor takes a deep breath and executes a flawless formal bow. Despite her trembling nerves, she delivers a perfectly rehearsed greeting. "I came to greet you, Lord Sa-eon," she announces, earnestly thanking the mighty clan head for his life-saving medicine, the clean clothes, and the wonderfully warm bed. The fearsome patriarch simply smiles, silently impressed by her impeccable etiquette. Leaning down, he gently pats her little dumpling buns, his massive hand surprisingly tender as he warmly expresses his relief that her fever has finally broken. "I swear, this terrifying warlord is rapidly turning into a total softie." To help her settle in, Lord Sa-eon cheerfully asks his son, Baek Ga-yoon, to personally show their cute little guest around the sprawling estate. Soya immediately shrinks back, staring up at the rigid boy in absolute, undeniable panic. Why would a true noble ever want to play with a discarded fate? But to her sheer shock, Ga-yoon instantly drops his icy demeanor. Flashing a blindingly bright, welcoming smile, the second young master warmly introduces himself and gently offers to show her around the massive mansion. Bewildered by the sudden shift, the blushing little girl hesitates before shyly slipping her tiny, trembling fingers into his outstretched hand. Watching the two children walk away hand in hand, the mighty clan head beams with overwhelming fatherly pride. He happily notes how harmonious and adorable they look together, just like real siblings. He truly believes his scholarly second son will be a wonderful older brother to their traumatized guest. That sweet illusion shatters instantly. The very second they step completely out of his father's protective sight, Ga-hyun abruptly stops dead in the empty, shadowed corridor. As the nervous little girl calls out, he slowly turns back, his friendly smile entirely replaced by a freezing, downright terrifying glare. Young Master Yule leads Soya down the grand, sunlit corridors, but inwardly, he's fuming with absolute confusion. What on earth is father thinking? Giving the West Wing's most prestigious room to a tiny, abandoned girl of completely unknown origins completely defies all of their traditions. That specific room carries a heavy, unbreakable legacy for their clan. Whenever the White Tiger family lacks a true-born daughter, it houses an adopted girl meant for one singular, terrifying destiny. They are groomed exclusively to become the bride of the Golden Dragon, the future companion to the Emperor himself. Looking down at his unwanted little shadow, Yule evaluates her with sharp, intensely skeptical eyes. She definitely doesn't possess the fierce commanding aura of a predator. Feeling her tiny dough-soft fingers awkwardly clinging to his grip, he tries to categorize exactly what kind of fragile creature his father just dragged home. Is she a gentle little cat, or maybe a timid rabbit who only survives by quietly nibbling grass in the corner? Honestly, I can't blame him for getting distracted by how ridiculously cute she is. But Yule forcefully shakes his head, snapping out of the comparison. Her fluffy aesthetic isn't the real problem here. A dreadful, chilling suspicion takes root in his mind. Does his father actually intend to substitute this random stray for a proper, blood-tied candidate? The sheer political implications are staggering. Sensing his sudden heavy silence, Soya tentatively peeks up through her lashes, her wide eyes full of nervous, unspoken hesitation. Oblivious to the deadly political weight of her new bedroom, she obediently follows him into the sprawling, bright hydrangea garden. Plastering on a flawless, beaming smile, Yule plays the perfect, welcoming older brother. But beneath that cheerful facade, he's internally groaning. This is a pain. Why on earth do I have to be the one showing this kid around? As Yule casually suggests their next stop should be the library, Soya physically hesitates. Sensing his underlying reluctance and deep discomfort, she nervously points out that he must be incredibly busy. Though Yule tries to awkwardly deny it, his stiff posture gives him away. Desperate not to be a burden, Soya flashes a perfectly sweet, accommodating smile. She gently offers to wait out in the garden by herself so he can return to his important duties. Visibly relieved to be off the hook, Yule quickly agrees and promises to send a servant. Left completely alone among the sprawling, sunlit hydrangeas, Soya lets out a heavy, defeated sigh. The dark, looming memory of her cruel former family surfaces in her mind. She's already convinced that her new older brother finds her utterly troublesome and dislikes her. Honestly, it breaks my heart to see how quickly she expects to be hated. Her gloomy thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a soft, unexpected clatter. Peeking out from behind a nearby sliding door is another young boy with bright blue eyes. He absolutely freezes the second he spots the little girl standing out in the courtyard. Deep panic washes over the boy's flushed face. Utterly flustered by her sudden presence, he violently flinches backward. He entirely misses his footing and goes tumbling down the wooden steps with a loud, painful crash. Startled by the fall, Soya immediately rushes forward to check on him. The boy frantically throws a hand up, screaming at her to stay away. But when she points out his injury, he looks down, deeply horrified to find his knee scraped and bleeding. Blushing with humiliation, he jumps right back to his feet. He loudly declares himself as Bak Ga Yul, the proud third son of the clan. He fiercely insists that crying over a tiny scratch is only for little fluffballs like her, before spinning on his heel and bolting away. Just what exactly is up with these brothers? Watching the youngest young master sprint away, Soya is completely paralyzed by guilt. She is terrified that he's furious because he tripped over her, but more than anything, she just wants someone to treat his bleeding leg before it gets worse. Her anxious thoughts are interrupted when two frantic servants rush into the sunlit courtyard. Finding her all alone, they immediately start scolding the second young master for abandoning his duties. Though Soya desperately tries to defend her prickly new older brother. As they gently lead her back inside, Soya timidly asks about the boy who fell, her wide eyes full of lingering worry. Instead of sharing her panic, the maids just burst into bright laughter. They casually reassure her that the clumsy youngest master takes tumbles all the time. After all, he's a sturdy tiger who never sheds a single tear. Cut to that exact same sturdy tiger. These brothers are seriously dramatic. He is currently shrieking in agony while an attendant dabs his tiny scratch. Tears prick Gayul's eyes as he fiercely defends his honor. He absolutely couldn't show such a pathetic, weak side to a tiny fluffball. Distracted from his stinging knee, the boy starts wildly guessing her animal lineage. Since she definitely isn't a fierce predator, he briefly considers a mouse. But she's far too quiet. A puppy, perhaps? He gets visibly excited at the thought of those sparkling eyes and adorable messy hair, but his attendant quickly bursts his bubble, pointing out that puppy beasts are naturally robust, while their new guest seems incredibly fragile. Gayul clutches his head in absolute, undeniable panic. If she isn't a wild deer, what kind of weak creature did his father bring home? Later that day, reports of this obsessive curiosity finally reach the second young master. Yule sits quietly in his chair, listening to his attendants confirm that his foolish little brother has been secretly trailing their mysterious new guest around all afternoon. Meanwhile, back in his grand study, the white tiger patriarch is absolutely having the time of his life. Hearing reports that his sensible second son is quietly watching the youngest stalk their mysterious new guest, he waves off his attendant with a delighted, booming laugh. While she worries about Yule neglecting his duties, the patriarch simply orders her to leave them be. He thinks his son's newfound obsession with the tiny girl is perfectly adorable. His aide, however, is sweating bullets over the clan's rapidly swirling political gossip. Unable to hold back anymore, she nervously blurts out the burning question on everyone's mind. Did her fearsome master skip his royal meeting just to bring home a hidden, illegitimate daughter? I mean, you really can't blame the staff for jumping to conclusions. Dropping a random, unknown girl into the Wenling's most sacred guilty certainly makes him look intensely guilty. The patriarch's jaw practically drops at the completely ridiculous misunderstanding. He awkwardly tries to explain that he definitely isn't her secret father. He insists he literally just stumbled across the tiny fluffball by chance and impulsively decided to steal her. But judging by his aide's flat, unamused stare, she isn't buying a single word of his bizarre confession. Why on earth would the continent's most terrifying warlord just pick up a stray kid off the street? Just pick up a stray kid. As he defends his seemingly random kidnapping, his grip slowly tightens on the armrest of his chair. A far more serious haunting memory suddenly surfaces in the quiet room. Was finding Soya truly just a coincidence? He recalls the glowing, lean, ethereal figure of an oracle, delivering one absolute, undeniable command. Steal the most precious thing from that place. She promised he would recognize his destiny at a single glance. Could this fragile, discarded little impostor actually be the supreme treasure he was sent to claim? Deep in the shadowed halls of memory, a life-altering bargain is finally struck. The fifth prince, heir, sits bathed in an ethereal light, issuing a seemingly impossible command to the legendary white tiger patriarch. Go to the land of the vermilion bird and steal their most valuable, closely guarded possession, and the ultimate prize is his. It's an audacious promise, especially since the mythical dragon's blood herb blooms solely from an emperor's coronation. But heir doesn't even flinch under the warlord's scrutiny. With chilling, absolute certainty, the young royal declares he will personally seize the throne, swearing to deliver the legendary elixir before the year ends. The patriarch is stunned by the sheer, raw ambition burning fiercely in the boy's eyes. When exactly did his sweet, eager-to-please disciple develop the icy, calculating stare of a ruthless ruler? Intrigued by this dark transformation, he accepts the mission to steal a baffling riddle of a treasure, something whose true, priceless worth goes entirely unrecognized. Kneeling before the future emperor, the patriarch flashes a dangerous smirk, wondering aloud what happens if he just decides to keep the enticing prize for himself. The prince remains completely unfazed, simply demanding the mysterious item be kept safe. As the memory fades into the present, the warlord confronts a staggering truth. Was finding the discarded little Soya really a coincidence? His fierce red-haired aide certainly doesn't think he's acting entirely rational about the situation. Cornering him in his quiet study, she frantically points out that housing a stray child in a room exclusively reserved for noble ladies is stirring up wild, dangerous rumors. She demands to know if he genuinely plans to adopt the fluffball, and he opens his mouth to deny it. Then, a vivid, heartwarming vision of the tiny girl smiling and calling him Papa blooms in his mind. The terrifying leader of the White Tiger clan instantly melts, secretly deciding that a daughter sounds absolutely wonderful. Honestly, I think our fearsome warlord is already wrapped completely around her tiny finger, and even his aide can read the goofy realization on his face. His fiercely practical aide refuses to back down, insisting that an adopted lady must be strong enough to represent their entire clan. She furiously points out that having two daughters will inevitably force a brutal comparison. Which of the two girls does he honestly think will wither under that pressure? It would be far kinder, she argues, to send the pitiful stray to a lesser family. The patriarch simply plugs his ears, stubbornly muttering that there's no rule against having multiple ladies. Scowling at his aide, he calls her a wicked, cold-blooded red fox. Doesn't she have even a shred of pity for the tiny girl? Before their heated bickering can escalate further, a maid nervously interrupts the standoff, carrying an urgent report about their mysterious little guest. Meanwhile, out in the sunlit gardens, the young silver-haired Lord Yule is conducting his own secret surveillance. Peering intensely through a brass spyglass, he observes the dozing girl from the safety of the bushes. He grumbles that the weak can't possibly survive in their warlord clan, completely brushing off a servant's warning that he's skipping his grueling morning training. Yule proudly insists he's currently busy uncovering the fluffball's true identity. When his servant teases him about hiding in the shrubs, the boy defensively admits he just doesn't have a choice. She's so terrifyingly frail that approaching her directly might make her faint from sheer terror. Honestly, he's convinced even a mild breeze might blow the tiny girl right over. Right on cue, a sudden, violent gust of wind sweeps across the yard, and Soya practically flies right off her resting boulder. Yule completely loses his mind. Screaming for the little fluffball to hold on, the panicked young master abandons his stealth mission and scrambles frantically into the clearing to catch her. But when he desperately searches behind the rock, the fragile girl has vanished into thin air. Yule stops dead in his tracks, his eyes darting across the empty grass. Sitting helplessly near his shoes is a tiny, incredibly round white baby bird. The boy stares down in absolute, world-shattering disbelief. Is this literal chirping cotton ball actually the human girl he's supposed to call sister? The stunned young lord and his servant simply stare at the tiny avian resting peacefully in his palm. The maid eagerly squeals over its adorable tail feathers, completely convinced this literal baby bird is their missing sister. Yule just sighs. He assumes the poor fluffball exhausted herself into this bizarre transformation, but a second later, the boy's mild relief completely shatters. He freezes in sheer terror as a volatile, glowing blue orb pulses violently within the tiny creature's chest. The panicked maid asks if they should call a physician, but Yule knows better. Her fractured spirit core is dangerously unstable. She needs help immediately. Sprinting breathlessly into the sacred shrine, Yule desperately screams for his Aunt Sarah. The stunning divine priestess of the White Tiger clan pinches her brow, clearly annoyed by the young beast's reckless, ill-mannered intrusion. I mean, can you really blame the kid for panicking over his fragile new sister? Yule shoves the bird forward, begging her to save the little fluffball. Sarah steps closer, thoroughly baffled that their fearsome warlord adopted a frail winged creature. But as her golden divine magic washes over the unconscious bird, the priestess's calm demeanor vanishes. Her eyes widen in absolute, unmasked horror. Realizing the catastrophic danger, she doesn't waste another second. The priestess immediately orders the terrified servant to summon the patriarch right now. Whatever ancient secret is hiding inside this tiny discarded child, it's far bigger than any of them realize. Meanwhile, a sinister quiet settles over the Vermilion Bird Palace. Standing in a moonlit pavilion, the haughty, older sister coldly demands an update on their fugitive impostor. A masked spy kneels in the shadows, delivering a ruthless, final confirmation. The fake daughter is dead. She shows no remorse, but his chilling report doesn't end there. Reaching deep into his dark robes, the killer produces a small, weathered pouch retrieved from her last known location. The sister stares silently down at the pathetic remnant. Will this cruel family ever realize the priceless treasure they so carelessly threw away? They are absolute fools. Staring at a familiar red bracelet retrieved from the impostor's discolored guilt, the haughty older sister feels a fleeting, unwanted pang of guilt, but she quickly buries that rare remorse under cold justification. She desperately tells herself she never actually intended for the fake daughter to die. She just wanted the impostor gone. Remembering her precious true sister's tears, the noble woman completely hardens her heart against the memories. She easily dismisses the assassin's failure to secure a corpse. Even if the fragile, discarded child somehow survived the freezing wilderness, she is absolute dead weight now. Her demise is absolutely certain. Meanwhile, back at the White Tiger estate, the patriarch and young Yule watch anxiously over the unconscious Soya. The furious priestess sharply scolds the fearsome warlord for his negligence. How could he not notice the little girl's spirit core was completely shattered? The patriarch defensively explains you can only examine a core during beastification, and he's never even seen his tiny fluffball transform. But Sarah delivers a far more horrifying truth to the stunned men. The child's core wasn't just damaged by some tragic accident. Someone intentionally destroyed it. I can't believe her former family was this utterly vicious. The White Tiger clan's healers are completely appalled by their medical findings. The fact that little Soya survived this long without her spirit core is a miracle in itself, though it tragically explains her heartbreakingly tiny stature. Without that vital energy, a beastkin simply cannot grow properly. How has she endured so much pain? Stripping someone of their core is a brutal, agonizing punishment meant exclusively for the most heinous criminals in the realm. Worse, that absolute authority belongs only to the direct descendants of the 4 great clans. The chilling implications point squarely at one man. Jeok Yayun, the cruel patriarch of the Vermilion Bird clan. The White Tiger patriarch stares down at the fragile girl in absolute disbelief. The Vermilion Bird's leader is famed across the south for his unyielding righteousness, making this horrific cruelty impossible to fathom. But Priestess Sarah delivers an even darker twist. He destroyed the core of a child this small on purpose. His blood runs cold at the horrific revelation, but the nightmare doesn't end there. A nervous maid steps forward with a grim report from the bath. The child's tiny frame is absolutely riddled with scars, painting a harrowing picture of relentless, long-term abuse. The patriarch's eyes immediately harden with protective fury. He vows to send investigators south to uncover every ugly truth. For now, Sarah has administered a special elixir to stabilize the little one's condition. Rest and a proper diet will help her regain her immediate strength, but the fundamental devastating damage remains. There is only one known way to perfectly heal a shattered spirit core. They are going to need the legendary dragon blood herb. Before the immense weight of that nearly impossible task can fully sink in, a tiny gasp breaks the heavy tension. Little Yule spots movement from the bed. Soya finally flutters her sleepy eyes open, instantly sending the room into chaos. "Are you hurting anywhere?" The famously fearsome leader and the young boy completely abandon their dignity, swarming the bed with frantic, breathless questions. Still groggy and bracing for punishment, the discarded imposter can only blink up at her terrifying new family in sheer bewilderment. Seriously, this clan is too soft. Waking up to their intense stares, Soya's mind immediately races to the worst-case scenario. She clearly remembers dozing off on a sun-warmed rock outside. Did her careless laziness offend them? Trembling under Sayan's concerned gaze, she quickly bows her head and apologizes for being a useless, bad baby bird. She is absolutely terrified she's caused trouble for her hosts yet again. Instead of the harsh scolding she expects, Sayan gently pats her head, softly reassuring the anxious child that she isn't a burden at all. The uncharacteristic warmth is just too much for the little outcast to process. Large tears well up in her eyes as his comforting hand strokes her hair. Seeing the tears, young Yule completely panics, loudly accusing his older brother of making their precious cotton ball cry. Flustered, Sayan tries to defend himself while Soya frantically waves her hands. Desperate to stop the argument, she forces a comically large, exaggerated yawn, claiming she's just really sleepy. The transparent lie catches Sayan off guard, but his worried expression quickly melts into a tender smile. Seriously, who knew these ferocious tigers were such massive softies? Priestess Sarah wryly notes that the little one is yawning so wide her face might tear. While the brothers completely fall for the adorable act, the sharp-eyed healer isn't distracted for a second. Her gaze turns serious as she addresses the tiny girl directly, announcing that it is time for a private chat. Sayan immediately steps between them, arguing that their fragile guest desperately needs more rest. Sarah scoffs, asking if he seriously thinks a divine maiden would eat a child. Naturally, Yule overhears exactly that and shrieks in horror. Offended, Sarah snaps back with a terrifyingly fierce glare to defend her love for the tiny baby. Deeming the shrine way too noisy, she promptly kicks the overprotective brothers out. Finally alone, in the sudden quiet, Sarah's intimidating aura fades into a heavy, sympathetic silence. She looks down at the tiny girl sitting so politely on the oversized examination bed. It's time to rip off the bandage. Gently but firmly, the priestess asks about her broken energy and confirms the grim truth. You must not have known. Your spirit core hasn't been functioning at all. The devastating reality leaves little Soya completely frozen in shock. The horrific reality finally slots into place, unlocking a deeply buried memory. 3 years ago, her shattered energy wasn't an accident. It was Huayu. Her own older brother brutally extracted her glowing core. Silent, agonizing tears spill down her cheeks as she asks herself the ultimate heartbreaking question. Did her former family truly hate her that much? Priestess Sarah sighs quietly at the tragic sight, admittedly terrible at soothing crying children. Formally introducing herself as Bake Sarah, the divine maiden of the White Tiger Palace, she decides to offer a very specific kind of comfort. She gently informs the trembling child that her sacred shrine is perfectly soundproofed. Because of that, the tiny girl can cry as loudly as she wants. Cry loudly. Back in the Vermilion Bird clan, her tears only ever earned her vicious scolding and disgust. The servants always told the fake daughter she had no right to cry when the true lady, Riri, was the one suffering. Seeing the little girl's panicked hesitation, Sarah leans in with a teasing smirk, asking if Soya is waiting for a hug. Before the flustered child can even stammer a polite denial, the intimidating priestess pulls her into a tight, incredibly warm embrace. As a gentle hand rhythmically pats her back, the last of Soya's traumatic defenses completely crumble. She knows she shouldn't be a burden to her hosts, but she just can't hold the sorrow in anymore. The tiny, discarded imposter buries her face into Sarah's shoulder and absolutely wails, finally mourning the cruel family that threw her away. When she finally finishes crying her eyes out, the fierce protectiveness of the White Tiger clan only multiplies. Her newly assigned servants, Yeonjong and Sanho, are practically in tears themselves. They are deeply apologetic for ever leaving their precious lady's side while she was asleep. Flustered by their intense devotion, Soya frantically tries to wave off their dramatic apologies. But they are completely serious. Declaring that this will never happen again, the two servants insist on holding her tiny hands everywhere she goes. The sheer, uncomplicated affection is just too much. Since that day, she hasn't walked alone once, and honestly, who wouldn't want to be cherished like that? However, there is still one more overprotective person fiercely refusing to leave her side. The loyal maids gently remind young Yule that he is late for training, but the stubborn boy absolutely refuses to leave Soya's side. Blushing furiously, he loudly claims he has to stay because she is ridiculously fragile. Did he seriously just blame her for collapsing? The tiny girl immediately apologizes, completely missing his actual intentions. Realizing he upset her, the young lord frantically backpedals, proudly declaring he will personally protect her. When she innocently asks why, Yule's face turns into an absolute tomato. He desperately tries to admit she is cute, but chickens out at the last second. Squeezing his eyes shut, he screams that he is just worried she will run into ghosts. I mean, typical tsundere behavior, right? Catching himself right before he blurts out how cute she is, Yule scrambles for a terrible excuse. He loudly claims he's only staying behind to protect her from the terrifying ghosts that snatch away tiny children in the dead of night. Soya instantly pales in horror. Yule's heart pounds in his chest as he desperately hopes his clumsy lie worked. He actually thinks he fooled everyone. But the adult clan members sharing the courtyard are trying their absolute hardest not to laugh out loud. It is painfully obvious to everyone watching that their supposedly fierce young master is completely smitten with the little cotton ball. And honestly, who could blame him? It's his first time seeing a bird beastkin, and she's barely the size of his palm. From her fluffy white wings to those adorable little tail feathers, she is softer than anything he's ever touched. Even sick and trembling, the tiny girl is just undeniably, overwhelmingly precious. His silent swooning is abruptly interrupted when the little girl looks up at him, her huge pink eyes welling with fresh tears. If the courtyard is truly haunted, she cries, isn't it dangerous for him to stay? Trembling, she frantically insists he should leave her behind and save himself. Seriously, could she be any sweeter? Flustered by her genuine concern, the silver-haired boy immediately puffs out his chest to look brave. As the third son of the great White Tiger clan, he loudly declares he isn't afraid of anything. He demands to know if she's ever seen a real tiger before, loudly clarifying that a drawing in a picture book definitely doesn't count. When she just stares at him in blank confusion, Yule decides words simply aren't enough. Warning her to watch closely, he eagerly vows to show off his majestic, fearsome true form. With a dramatic poof, a massive cloud of smoke erupts in the middle of the courtyard. But as the white mist finally settles, the terrifying apex predator he promised looks an awful lot like a tiny, twitching, striped ear. When the smoke finally clears, the fearsome apex predator he promised is actually an absurdly adorable, knee-high tiger cub. He lets out a tiny roar, proudly demanding, "How is it? Majestic, right?" But Soya is completely captivated by his soft fur and squishy pink paw pads. Seriously, how is anyone supposed to be intimidated by that? Puffed up with pride, the little cub happily invites her to touch him. The observing adult clan members are melting at the sugary sweet sight. They quickly excuse themselves to grab drinks, leaving the kids alone in the courtyard to play. Soya gently strokes his silver-striped head, and the supposedly terrifying young master practically purrs under her gentle hand. Riding high on her sweet praise, Yule loudly barks out a brand new demand. Now it's her turn. He bounces on his paws, eager to see her true fluffy beastkin form. Soya instantly freezes. Her bright eyes widen as a sudden wave of dread washes over her. Shrinking back in horror, she stammers out a frantic refusal. She desperately insists, "I'm not cool at all." Seeing her eyes instantly well up with fresh tears, the tiny tiger freaks out. He hastily backtracks, waving his paws to reassure her that it's perfectly fine if she isn't cool. If he isn't careful, he's going to make his cute new friend cry. But Soya is already spiraling downward into heavy memories. She is deeply terrified he'll be disgusted by her true shape. After all, everyone back in the Vermilion Bird clan had cruelly pointed their fingers and laughed at the useless little imposter. Just as the crushing memory threatens to pull her under, a heavy leather ball suddenly rolls right up to her knees. She blinks through her tears in pure surprise. The little tiger nudges the toy forward, his tail wagging happily. Completely abandoning his demand to see her transform, Yule joyfully barks at her to hurry up and throw it, eager to just play instead. Soya blinks in surprise as she catches the heavy leather toy. Hesitantly, she tosses it back across the courtyard, and the supposedly terrifying young master eagerly chases after it like a happy puppy. Their playful game hasn't gone unnoticed. Watching from a nearby window, Yule's older brother crosses his arms in harsh disapproval. He coldly criticizes his sibling for goofing off instead of training, noting with a pleasant smile that the fluffy cub is still just a pathetic baby. Beside him, his vassal sweats nervously at the icy words coming from such a gentle face. The silver-haired boy's sharp gaze then shifts down to Soya, who is already panting from exhaustion. Did the tiny imposter truly have a choice? Assuming Yule forced her to play and she was just too timid to refuse, he mutters that the fragile girl is going to collapse again. When his vassal playfully teases him for worrying about her, the older brother instantly drops his smile. He flatly denies it, claiming he couldn't care less about a foolish child. Smoothly changing the subject, he brings up the upcoming Mountain Lord Festival. This year's gathering of the branch families is drawing serious attention. The winner of the competition won't just get a title, they will earn a permanent place right here in the main estate. His vassal eagerly runs down the list of hopeful candidates, but the young master brutally shoots every single one down. The brown tiger girl is far too foolish to be a representative, and the black tiger girl is completely obsessed with their eldest brother. Even the silver tiger candidate gets dismissed, simply because he doesn't like her vibe. Honestly, this family is brutally tough to please. Exasperated, his vassal finally asks what kind of person he actually wants. Looking back toward the courtyard, the young master narrows his eyes. If he's going to get a new younger sister anyway, he already knows exactly what he expects. Someone small, fair, and squishy. The older brother clearly has his eye on a very specific candidate. Down below, his tiny target rests in the grass, happily exhausted from the game. A gentle attendant hurries over to offer the dizzy girl a refreshing drink. The woman points out that their energetic young master was finally dragged away to his actual training. She gently asks if the fragile girl felt forced to entertain him. Soya shakes her head with a bright smile. She genuinely had a blast. Catching her breath, the little imposter nervously asks if the estate is actually haunted. The attendant naturally assumes the child is frightened by the spooky tales. But why is she suddenly so concerned? It turns out Soya isn't worried about herself. She is terrified a ghost might snatch the young masters away. After seeing how tiny and harmless the tiger cub truly is, she proudly vows to protect her new friends instead. I swear this girl is an absolute angel. The attendant melts at the sweet declaration. She assures the tiny girl that everyone will be absolutely thrilled to hear it. Gripping her water gourd tightly, Soya bravely accepts the scary risk. Besides, she darkly reminds herself that no spirit would ever want a shameless, fake beastkin like her anyway. The cruel insults of her former family still echo in her shadowy memories, but she refuses to let them win. Pumping her tiny fists, she loudly vows to protect her new home. Under the glow of the full moon, the white tiger patriarch clutches his chest as a familiar phantom pain flares up. The lunar light always brings a heavy weight to his heart, dragging his mind back to a day he'd rather forget. In his memories, the bitter taste of blood coats his mouth amid the roaring flames of a ruined battlefield. Torn banners turn to ash around him. A devastating strike shatters the air, echoing the crushing loss he suffered in the fires of war. He remembers desperately clutching his chest, a glowing remnant of power fading right over his heart. This ancient agony weighs heavily on his burdened mind. He grits his teeth. To think such a small, fragile child is enduring that kind of agony. She shouldn't have to bear the exact same torment. Soya sleeps peacefully, though a fractured spiritual core still rests dangerously within her. His sister's healing arts have brought the tiny impostor back from the brink, but it's only a temporary fix. Unless her core is perfectly restored, the deadly root of her illness remains. There is only one known cure for a shattered spiritual foundation. He unrolls an ancient scroll, his eyes locking onto the illustration of a rare crimson flower, the dragon blood herb. But the royal who promised to secure that precious herb hasn't sent a single message since their deal. Heir swore, "I'll come check on the stolen goods once the imperial palace is sorted out." I can't help but wonder, is that supposedly gentle prince actually stirring up a bloodbath back home? The patriarch massages his temples, the mounting stress completely ruining any chance of a peaceful night. He sighs, deciding he might as well try to rest his eyes for just a moment. Can a fierce clan leader ever truly catch a break? But sleep will have to wait. A tiny tuft of white hair suddenly peeks into the room, bringing a spark of unexpected company. Tiptoeing silently across the grand study, the tiny cotton ball approaches the slumbering white tiger patriarch. He looks surprisingly peaceful, resting in his chair. Soya swallows hard, staring up at the fearsome man as she prepares to carry out her secret mission. This brave quest started just a few hours ago. A kind servant warmly assured the little girl that the entire family would be absolutely thrilled by her offer of protection. That gentle encouragement sparked a bright, hopeful fire in her innocent eyes. But her earnest desire to help stems from a deeply agonizing past. Back in her old home, the Vermilion Bird clan treated her touch like a vile disease. When she timidly offered a clean handkerchief, a spiteful maid violently snatched it away. The cruel servants threw the cloth straight into a blazing fire. They laughed cruelly, sneering. Even the ghosts think she's too filthy to drag away. How could anyone spit such awful venom at a defenseless child? Left alone in the dark, she watched her meager possessions turn to worthless ash. They branded her existence as a cursed blight. But as she stands in her new home, her eyes harden with resolve. She knows things are different now. The tiny impostor decides that if her belongings disgust evil spirits, leaving them near her new family will act as the ultimate ghost repellent. I have to admit, using her trauma as a defense mechanism is heartbreakingly clever, but a sad realization halts her momentum. She literally owns nothing. The few precious items she did possess are gone. She lost her small pouch during the chaotic festival. Even worse, the cherished beaded bracelet Hua Yu once gave her is broken, beyond repair. She lowers her head in despair. This is no time to be sad. Slapping her pale cheeks, the resilient girl forcefully shakes off the gloom. Determined to find something of her own, she bravely sneaks through the grand estate, ready to protect her new family at any cost. Wandering out into the moonlit courtyard, the determined girl finally spots the perfect solution to her lack of belongings. Ordinary garden pebbles. She eagerly gathers a small handful, wiping them spotless on her sleeve. Pressing her small hands together in earnest prayer, she begs the heavens to let them work. Since she touched them, her supposed curse just might be enough to chase away any evil spirit. Armed with her newly crafted ghost words, she tiptoes through the silent estate. But the shadowy hallway leading to the patriarch's grand study looks incredibly intimidating to a small child. As she hesitates anxiously outside the door, the gentle maid Yanzhong suddenly catches her sneaking around way past her bedtime. Escorting her down the dark corridor with a warm lantern, Yanzhong can't help but smile at the little girl's earnest mission. The entire household staff already knows the famously fierce lord and his energetic silver-haired heir will be absolutely delighted by these crude, homemade gifts. Before they can reach the study, another loyal maid named Jeokyang steps out of the shadows. She assumes the child is just here to offer the patriarch more tearful thanks. But when the tiny impostor nervously reveals her small pouch of blessed stones, Jeokyang practically swoons with dramatic jealousy over the precious treasure. "I'm super-duper scared of ghosts, too!" Seeing Jeokyang's theatrical pout, Soya quickly offers to craft another special stone just for her. They seal the adorable bargain with a tight pinky promise. Seriously, who wouldn't want a protective pebble from this absolute cutie? That innocent promise instantly sparks a playful, petty turf war between the adult staff members. Yeonjong fiercely glares at her sly co-worker, demanding to receive her protective charm first, since she personally attends to the little fluffball every single day. Can anyone in this ferocious clan resist her charm? Finally settling their harmless bickering, the two smitten maids gently usher her toward the heavy wooden doors. They warmly encourage the brave girl to step inside and present the ultimate ghost repellent to the fearsome patriarch all by herself. Stepping into the quiet, moonlit study, So-ya holds her breath as she spots the fearsome patriarch. To her absolute surprise, the terrifying lord is fast asleep at his grand desk. The heavy moonlight softens his sharp features, making him look incredibly peaceful. Realizing just how exhausted Naobit be from managing the entire clan, the thoughtful little girl resolves to be as quiet as a mouse. She tiptoes carefully across the floorboards, but a sudden, strained groan shatters the tranquil silence. The patriarch's face twists in deep agony as a cold sweat breaks out across his brow. Startled by his sudden distress, the tiny cotton ball trips over her oversized robes and tumbles hard onto the floor with a painful thud. She frantically blurts out a tearful apology for disturbing his precious rest. But as she peers up at the towering desk, she realizes his eyes are still tightly shut. He isn't waking up. He's completely trapped in a suffocating nightmare. Absolute panic grips her small, racing heart. Convinced that malicious entities have already snuck in to torture her new family member, she bravely stands her ground. Can you believe this tiny child is trying to face Damon's duel? Mr. Ghosts, she cries out. Please don't bully him. Clasping her small pouch of homemade pebble talismans, she prays to the heavens with every ounce of her spirit. Suddenly, a blinding, radiant pink light erupts directly from her tiny hands. The miraculous warm energy violently bursts through the dark room, leaving the little imposter completely stunned by a hidden power she never knew she possessed. Startled by the sudden burst of warm pink light, So-ya drops her little talisman pouch. Did she just imagine that strange surge of magic? Peeking cautiously around the carved partition, the tiny imposter lets out a trembling sigh. For once, the fiercely intimidating white tiger patriarch is sleeping peacefully, free from his tormenting nightmares. Rushing into the dark hallway, the little cotton ball excitedly babbles to the gentle caretaker about successfully chasing away a scary ghost. I'll make one for you tomorrow too, she promised brightly. Touched by the child's innocent rambling, the woman smiles and tells her to get plenty of rest. But the woman's warm expression instantly turns to deep worry when she spots fresh, red blood smeared across the child's tiny palm. Brushing the painful scrape off as just a clumsy fall in the dark, the sweet girl is immediately shooed away to her room to apply some healing medicine. The following morning, bright sunlight floods the study as the patriarch stretches his arms wide. I have to admit, it is incredibly satisfying to see this notorious warlord genuinely confused by a simple good night's rest. Since yesterday was a full moon, the absolute peak of chaotic yin energy, he fully expected to suffer. Yet, as his loyal caretaker brings in his morning tea, he happily admits to feeling entirely refreshed. Looking down at his messy desk, his icy blue eyes noticeably soften at the sight of a crudely made ghost-repelling talisman. When his caretaker faithfully relays the little girl's dramatic story about fighting off a phantom in the palace, he easily pieces the puzzle together. So, the young Lord Yule made up a ghost story to hide his terrifying nightmares. Holding the small polished stone up to the warm morning light, a rare and deeply genuine smile graces his handsome features. Did she really try to protect a hardened warrior with that tiny, fragile body of hers? Seeing as he didn't suffer a single night terror, the fluffy little runaway has clearly worked a miracle on his guarded heart. Deeply moved by her fragile bravery, the notoriously fierce warlord decides his tiny savior deserves a proper reward. Turning to his loyal caretaker, he genuinely asks for advice on what to give the sweet girl. But when he seriously suggests gifting the child a heavy jewel-encrusted ceremonial sword granted by the emperor, his exasperated servant immediately shuts him down, pointing out that young ladies prefer dainty hair combs or painted fans. The woman loudly scolds him for considering handing a real razor-sharp weapon to a frail child. The patriarch quickly drops the ridiculous idea, suddenly terrified at the thought of his fragile little cotton ball accidentally cutting herself. What on earth can this battle-hardened man give her instead? Across the sunny estate, bright morning light streams into the guest room as the gentle caretaker brings Soya her steaming daily herbal decoction. Having raised the unruly young masters of the tiger clan, she fully expects a stubborn, noisy tantrum. Instead, she watches in absolute awe as the tiny girl bravely chugs the dark, terribly bitter medicine without a single flinch or complaint. Deeply touched by her quiet obedience, the caretaker warmly praises the amazing child and pops a small honeyed candy into her mouth. As the rich sugar melts on her tongue, the discarded runaway thinks back to the fearsome patriarch who safely held her in his massive arms. He graciously promised she could stay here for the time being. Honestly, I just want to protect this precious girl at all costs. Clinging to that lingering warmth, she desperately wishes his temporary promise could stretch on long enough for her to remember this sweet safety forever. But before the little impostor can fully settle into her hopeful dream, a sudden, sharp knock at the screen door pulls her back to reality. Who could be looking for her? The sudden knock pulls her back from her daydreams, revealing another maid carrying a sturdy wooden box. The tiny impostor is completely bewildered. Why would anyone bring her a presents button? But the gentle caretaker smiles warmly, explaining it's a special reward sent directly from the patriarch to thank her for the ghost-repelling talisman. Trembling with nervous anticipation, the sweet girl reaches out to unlatch the lid. Inside sits an undeniably adorable, plump white tiger plushie. The smiling maids relay the massive warlord's surprisingly sweet message. Thanks to her brave protection, this little tiger slept perfectly soundly last night. Who knew the terrifying warlord had such a soft spot? Overwhelmed by such a gentle, thoughtful gift, Soya buries her face into the soft fluff. As the plush material warms her cheeks, happy tears rapidly prick her eyes. She finally has something of her own. Clutching her new treasure tightly to her chest, she timidly looks up. By any chance, could I use some paper and ink? Assuming the young lady just wants to doodle some cute pictures, the women softly chuckle. But they are caught completely off guard by her fiery, wide-eyed determination. She intends to write a proper, formal letter of gratitude to the fearsome lord himself. Meanwhile, leagues away from this cozy, newfound warmth, the towering vermilion bird estate remains sickeningly cheerful. In a vibrant, sunlit garden, the cruel patriarch dotes endlessly on Riri, the true daughter. He happily claps along with her innocent giggles, captivated by how the freshly bloomed flowers perfectly match her bright hair. Watching from the shadows, the haughty older sister smiles, relieved their precious Riri has fully bounced back from the nasty ordeal of expelling the fake. But as she approaches and pulls their father aside for a private report, the idyllic afternoon mood completely shatters. Staring coldly at the clan leader, she delivers a chilling update that stops him in his tracks. That child is dead. Standing before her father's massive desk, the haughty older sister elaborates on her chilling report. She insists she only sent an operative to secretly relocate the disgraced child far away. But by the time the shadowy assassin arrived, the little runaway had already vanished into the night. All they found was a disturbing trail of fresh bloodstains and this single discarded pouch. As the stoic patriarch examines the small sack, his breath hitches. It's the exact same lucky charm he lovingly tied to Soya's waist on the morning of her awakening. A bittersweet memory surfaces of a much gentler father. He had tenderly tucked his own fiery feather inside the pouch. He warmly promised the anxious girl that even if she failed, she would always be his precious daughter. But a cruel twist of fate ruined everything. Ironically, if the sweet girl had simply failed to transform, she could have safely stayed. Instead, she perfectly manifested as a fluffy snow-white bird, undeniably exposing her as a fake. Wait, did this supposedly cruel man actually love her all along? Tormented by the memory of discarding her, the clan leader finally breaks down. He violently sobs into his hands. Pulling his pristine red feather from the tiny pouch, the devastated father realizes the truth. The sweet girl desperately clung to his false promise all this time. How could he have abandoned her? Slamming his fist onto the heavy desk, His agonizing grief rapidly hardens into a terrifying, obsessive command. They must find the child immediately. Panicking at his intense reaction, the older sister frantically protests. She abruptly blurts out a horrifying secret. Soya's fragile spirit core was already heavily damaged before she even fled. Even if the child somehow escaped the mountains, her broken body couldn't possibly survive for long. But the unyielding patriarch completely ignores her grim logic. Glaring furiously through his tears, he fiercely demands they bring him a corpse. Only then will he ever accept his little bird's death. Yule excitedly skips over to his older brother, proudly showing off a smooth little stone. "Look at this, brother. It's a talisman I got from Fluffball." The older boy immediately scoffs at the rock. He had teased Soya yesterday about ghosts haunting the palace just to mess with her, but as Yule happily chatters on, a heavy realization suddenly settles over him. His mind snaps back to the dead of night. He had been lying in bed when the door gently creaked open. Instinctively feigning sleep, he listened as the tiny girl crept into his room. Why on earth was she sneaking around his space? He had cracked an eye open just a sliver, watching her carefully place something on his desk before scurrying back out. When he finally got up to inspect the strange gift, he found nothing but a completely ordinary pebble. Assuming it was some kind of ridiculous prank or a sick joke aimed at him, he hadn't hesitated to toss it straight into the trash bin. Now, the crushing truth hits him. She was genuinely trying to protect him from the ghosts he made up. Oops. Back in the present, guilt begins to eat away at the older brother. He stays uncharacteristically quiet as they stroll down the steps. Yule, oblivious to his internal crisis, excitedly brings up Soya's beast form. Why would she be so terrified of shifting when she just looks like an adorable little cotton ball? The boy confidently concludes she must be scared of getting kidnapped for her overwhelming cuteness. Yule's brilliant deduction is abruptly cut short when he crashes face first into his brother's back. Before the boy can even whine about the sudden halt, a terrifying sight freezes the blood in his veins. Wait, master! Their imposing martial arts instructor is waiting for them right at the edge of the training grounds. The older man smiles with a dark, menacing aura, casually reminding the boy that he skipped out on his training yesterday. Yule's survival instincts scream at him to run for his life, but before he can take a single step, his older brother grabs him by the collar. "Here, take him!" he says, cheerfully offering Yule up without hesitation. Brotherhood really is a beautiful thing, isn't it? As Yule screams out in dramatic betrayal, getting unceremoniously hauled away by their overly cheerful instructor, the older boy just stands there with a satisfied smirk. With his noisy little brother finally out of his hair, he lets out a deep breath, savoring the glorious peace and quiet. Elsewhere, little Soya is thoroughly covered in dirt, actively digging around the garden beds. She's on a serious mission to find the smoothest, prettiest stones available. Why? Because the sweet maids playfully challenged her to a rock hunting game, and she wants to craft handmade talismans for everyone. Her diligent scavenging is abruptly cut short when a tall shadow falls over the hydrangeas. The older brother stares down at her messy state with unreadable eyes. Scrambling to her feet, Soya respectfully bows her head in greeting. He returns it with a painfully polite, entirely superficial smile. Did he feel the protective magic of her gift? Her hope is instantly crushed by his next words. Dropping his friendly facade, he flatly calls the trash she left in his room highly annoying. Soya's heart sinks. Of course a noble young master would view her talisman as a filthy pebble. "Please don't enter my room without permission," he continues, his tone hardening. "You're not even from the White Tiger Palace." That icy reminder of her outsider status hits her right in the chest. Without a single word of defense, the tiny girl folds into a deep, submissive apology. Seeing her shrink away from him, an unexpected jolt of regret clenches his stomach. Seriously, why is he feeling so ridiculously guilty right now? He frantically tries to convince himself that setting strict boundaries with a total stranger is just common sense. Forcing himself to ignore the sting, he promptly walks away. Left completely isolated in the garden, Soya awkwardly scratches at her dirt-smudged cheek. She isn't resentful of his harsh rejection. She simply blames herself, sadly wondering if her heartfelt gift was thrown out just because it didn't look pretty enough. I honestly just want to reach in and give her a hug. Still lingering in the sunlit garden with dirt heavily smudged across her pale cheeks, Soya stubbornly contemplates how to craft a better talisman. She completely blames herself for the older brother's harsh rejection. She innocently assumes her previous stone was simply too ugly for a noble young master's tastes. As she ponders her next move, the heavy wooden gates abruptly creak open. She turns around just in time to watch a group of servants carry a grand, elegant palanquin right into the courtyard. Who could possibly be visiting? Moving inside the palace, the atmosphere is significantly more cheerful. The sweet maids playfully crown Soya the undisputed winner of their rock hunting game, eagerly offering up their own flawlessly smooth finds as a prize. Yule, having somehow survived his grueling training session, excitedly pulls up a chair to join the fun. Surrounded by such effortless, unhesitating affection, the tiny girl clutches her skirt tightly. Her little chest flutters with a strange, overwhelming warmth she isn't quite used to yet. It's impossible not to root for her. Curious about some unfamiliar supplies on the table, Soya points them out to the staff. The maids gently explain that they are special ceramic paints. They suggest she decorate her chosen stones before baking them in a kiln to seal the colors. Her bright ruby eyes immediately light up with thrilled excitement at the brilliant idea. If she painstakingly paints the rocks to make them look absolutely beautiful, she is entirely certain the stubborn older brother will finally accept her heartfelt protective gift. While the children happily dab away at their rocks, the maids begin gossiping about the fancy palanquin Soya spotted earlier. It turns out that shifters from the distant branch families are officially arriving. They're here for the highly anticipated Mountain Lord Festival. It's a massive event where rowdy young tigers gather to fiercely compete for the year's most prestigious title. Yule proudly confirms the guest list. However, he smugly notes that none of them possess his magnificent white fur. Soya pauses her brush, staring wide-eyed. The peaceful estate is about to be swarming with a whole new pack of tigers. Back at the table, Soya diligently decorates her smooth stones with adorable tiger stripes. Hearing the maids mention the arriving branch families, the sweet girl happily decides to craft protective talismans for every single guest. She wants to keep all of the patriarch's important visitors perfectly safe. Meanwhile, the White Tiger Patriarch receives a rather baffling report from his sprawling intelligence network. His spies have secretly scoured the southern lands just as he commanded. But strangely, not a single soul recognizes the name Soya. How could a child simply not exist in the public eye? The sharp-minded ruler carefully weighs the bizarre situation. Either the tiny fluffball has been lying to them this entire time, or she was kept completely hidden inside the Vermilion Bird Estate. He slowly pieces the scattered puzzle together, his blue eyes narrowing in sudden realization. Doesn't the Vermilion Bird's ruthless leader, Jiak Yayun, have a young daughter? Could their precious little cotton ball actually be the missing heir of a fierce rival? The patriarch stares out over the peaceful estate, finally voicing a dangerous question. Does the ruthless leader of the Vermilion Bird clan have a young daughter? His loyal subordinate pales instantly. He is horrified at the implication, quickly arguing that their rival clan's official heir, Riri, was just formally registered. There is also the glaring inconsistency of her arrival. Why would a true Vermilion Bird daughter be mercilessly hunted by her own clan's three-legged crow? Trying to rationalize the situation, the subordinate suggests their little cotton ball might simply be a disposable young attendant of the exact same age. That's not an impossibility, the patriarch concedes, his expression remaining perfectly guarded. He turns away from the window, piecing together the fragmented clues. The only undeniable truth right now is that their tiny, fragile guest is intimately tied to the inner workings of the Vermilion Bird Estate. Suddenly, the heavy atmosphere shatters. The patriarch calls his subordinate with a terrifying, ominous weight, only to pivot to an entirely different crisis. He produces a fiercely sweet thank you letter from Soya, totally enchanted by her round, adorable handwriting. Honestly, who wouldn't melt over such a precious note? But the subordinate refuses to let his leader lose focus over a cute letter. He sighs, firmly reminding his lord of the harsh reality between their families. No matter how beautifully educated the child might be, she is a winged creature, fundamentally different from their fierce tiger clan. He aggressively taps a stack of neglected scrolls, scolding the patriarch for ignoring the carefully selected candidate profiles for the upcoming Mountain King festival. The exasperated man insists a final decision must be made regarding the fluffball's living arrangements before the festivity conclude. But the patriarch's attention has completely vanished, a warm smile breaking across his face. Little Soya steps into the grand hall, clutching a woven basket with a hesitant, rosy-cheeked greeting. The famously fearsome leader instantly softens, welcoming his favorite guest. Yet, even as he greets her, his sharp eyes naturally drift down, wondering what she could possibly be holding so tightly. The patriarch's loyal subordinate kindly welcomes their tiny, rosy-cheeked guest. Reaching into her woven basket with a serious expression, Soya proudly presents the precious gift she promised him days ago. A smooth river stone carefully painted with a sleeping red fox. Watching from the doorway, the white tiger patriarch scowls, instantly jealous of the subordinate stealing his favorite fluffball's attention. He strides forward to intervene, only to freeze when Soya beams up at him, holding out a second, specially drawn stone just for him. A rare, faint flush creeps across his face. Overwhelmed by the undeniably sweet gesture, the famously fearsome leader drops to one knee. He gently cradles her tiny hand as if she had just handed him a priceless world-saving artifact. But as he studies the delicate brushwork, confusion breaks his sentimental mood. Why exactly did she paint him a tiny, striped cat? The subordinate stifles a laugh as Soya's face falls, her bottom lip pouting as she weakly defends her fierce tiger. The patriarch's soul practically leaves his body when he realizes he just insulted her masterpiece. As the subordinate mercilessly mocks his supposedly failing eyesight, the desperate leader violently backpedals. He swears up and down that it is unmistakably a magnificent tiger. Taking his excuse entirely to heart, the innocent girl solemnly asks if his failing vision is a serious condition. Without missing a beat, the cunning patriarch smiles warmly. He claims it is indeed terrible, which means she simply must visit his office every day to help him heal. When Soya nervously doubts whether a little bird who hasn't even awakened her spiritual abilities could truly be of any help, the men are quick to correct her. They insist her bright, innate energy is more than enough. Hearing this, a quiet spark of determination lights up her rosy eyes. Leaving the grand hall, she clutches her basket with a proud little bounce in her step. Her secret project is almost complete. She's handed out her talismans to everyone she met, leaving only a precious few inside. Honestly, I'm jealous of whoever gets the next one, as the little girl skips down the grand corridor, eagerly hoping to find her favorite silver-haired young master. A loud voice suddenly echoes through the hall. A boisterous child in a bright green dress marches right up, pointing an accusatory finger at our wandering fluffball. The stranger introduces herself as Orang of the Brown Tiger Clan. Inspecting Soya's gentle features, she bluntly declares that this tiny creature doesn't resemble a fierce beast at all. When Soya nervously explains she was brought here by the patriarch himself, Orang gasps, realizing this must be the rumored outsider occupying the legendary West End room. Orang proudly shares a clan secret her father entrusted to her. That grand, beautiful chamber is exclusively reserved for the ultimate victor of the upcoming Mountain King festival. Whoever claims that victory is destined to become the official young lady of the White Tiger Clan. A heavy, suffocating knot of guilt forms in Soya's stomach. The terrifying patriarch gave her a warm sanctuary, but she had absolutely no idea it was a sacred prize rightfully belonging to someone else. Oblivious to the sudden shift in mood, Orang crosses her arms, questioning if this innocent child is trying to scheme her way into becoming another adopted daughter. Then, the blunt girl drops a devastating question. Is she just trying to be a fake tiger? That single word completely shatters Soya's hard-won peace. Plunged instantly into a waking nightmare, she hears the phantom screams of the Vermilion Bird clan echoing in her ears. They viciously curse her for stealing the true heir's rightful place. The woven basket slips from her trembling fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Pure panic suffocates the tiny girl as she wildly stammers that she never intended to steal anyone's spot. Startled by her terrified rambling, Orang steps closer, worriedly asking if she feels sick. But before the painful misunderstanding can be cleared, a sharp, commanding voice cuts through the tension from behind. Looks like the early festival guests are already causing trouble. The commanding voice belongs to Yoon Seo, a composed young lady from the Silver Tiger clan. Stepping into the corridor with an elegant fan, she coldly reprimands Orang for bullying a frail child who isn't even a beastman. She expected a fair rivalry for the West End room, not cruelty. Panicking, the accused boy frantically waves his hands, desperately trying to defend his innocence against the harsh accusation. Taking pity on the flustered boy, Soya quickly intervenes to clear his name. She softly explains that her sudden pallor is just sickness, completely unrelated to his harsh questions. Shocked by her pale face, Orang flees down the hall with an embarrassed, blustering demand that she never dare fall ill in front of him again. I think he actually has a soft spot for her. Seo gently retrieves the discarded woven basket, her sharp eyes softening as she hands it back. She warmly introduces herself, offering her absolute support anytime the tiny guest might need it. Accepting the basket with a polite bow, Soya feels a bittersweet pang. Even a girl this wonderfully kind must be here to compete for the ultimate prize. Retreating to the quiet edges of the estate, the exhausted fluffball slumps against a sunlit wall. The terrifying patriarch gave her a beautiful sanctuary, but he only ever promised it for the time being. Knowing the rightful owner of the grand chamber will soon arrive, she buries her trembling face in her knees. Stripped of her temporary safety, where can a fake daughter possibly go now? Meanwhile, in a quiet wing of the palace, Yul finds himself lingering by the window during the afternoon sheep hour. He hasn't seen Soya on her usual strolls lately, and the absence gnaws at him. He even dug out the plain stone she once threw, carefully polishing it and placing it on the sill just in case she passed by. Does he really think a polished rock is going to win her over? Flustered by his own anxious waiting, he tries to convince himself he has more important things to do. His inner denials are cut short when a young attendant approaches to discuss the upcoming Mountain Lord Festival. The servant asks how they should handle tea invitations from the other tiger clans, but the political talk fades into background noise. Yul's eyes lock onto the painted rock resting in the servant's palm. The attendant cheerfully explains that the tiny fox talisman was a personal gift drawn by Miss Fluffball herself. A sharp pang of territorial jealousy flares in the young master's chest. Refusing to be outdone, Yul proudly declares that he already received a special stone from her long before anyone else. But the servant's innocent clarification shatters his pride. These weren't the old gifts. Just yesterday, Soya gathered stones and handed out fresh talismans to everyone in the White Tiger Palace. Everyone except him. The bitter realization that he was entirely forgotten twists into sharp anger. Gritting his teeth, Yul storms past the bewildered attendant. He ignores the servant's desperate assurance that she must have simply made a mistake, forcefully shoving open the heavy hallway doors. Blinded by his own hurt, he viciously snaps that he doesn't need her trashy, useless stones anyway. Before his brain can catch up, he realizes exactly who he's yelling at. The silence that follows is suffocating. Soya flinches as if struck, tightly gripping her small woven basket. Dropping her gaze, the traumatized girl softly stammers out a broken apology. As she turns and flees down the corridor, Yul reaches out a helpless hand toward the empty doorway. All of his petty frustration vanishes, leaving behind a heavy, sickening wave of absolute regret. Retreating to the quiet palace gardens, Soya completely misunderstands the cause of Yul's explosive outburst. Clutching her little woven basket, she assumes the young master simply despises stones, blaming herself for trying to push her useless trash on him. Still, she stubbornly wants to make him a proper farewell talisman before her temporary stay comes to an end. Why is she always so eager to please those who hurt her? Her gloomy thoughts are interrupted by fierce little roars echoing across the stone courtyard. Two tiger cubs are squaring off in a bitter rivalry. A bristling brown cub aggressively mocks the white one. "Do you think anyone wants to be family with you?" They sneer, calling the other a pathetic fool. Before the turf war can escalate into a real brawl, the white tiger spots Soya watching from the stairs. Instantly dropping the fierce attitude, the fluffy cub bounds over with a delighted chirp. They are absolutely thrilled to see their favorite human fluffball walking by. Deeply insulted by being completely ignored mid-fight, the brown cub angrily lunges at them. The white tiger desperately tackles Soya out of the path, sending them both tumbling into the soft grass. Scrambling up, the white cub furiously scolds the attacker for endangering their precious candidate. The brown tiger's aggressive bravado instantly evaporates into sheer, sweaty guilt. Rather than being frightened by the rough ambush, Soya gently scoops the stunned brown cub into a tight, forgiving hug. She cheerfully promises that she isn't hurt at all, completely short-circuiting at the tender affection. The little bully turns beet red. Flustered and stammering about personal space, the cub scrambles free and sprints away in ultimate embarrassment. Watching the chaotic retreat, Soya can't help but giggle. She innocently points out that the white cub's fiery protectiveness actually reminds her a lot of Yule. "I resemble that stupid tiger?" The little cub gasps, absolutely horrified at being compared to the youngest young master. Settling quietly by the lotus pond, Soya turns to her furry confidante. She asks for some desperate gift advice for her older brothers. Across the sunlit courtyard, Yule stands with a gloomy, tight-lipped pout, still stewing over the talisman incident. Is he really sulking over a missing rock? Observing him from a safe distance, Soya actually finds his grumpy behavior incredibly adorable. She decides not to soothe his wounded pride just yet. Instead, she hides safely behind a decorative rock with the white tiger cub. She desperately needs gift advice for the second young master, Hyun, before her time runs out. Their covert plotting is abruptly cut short by a sudden rustle from the nearby trees. Believing his precious candidate is under attack, the fiercely protective cub instantly lunges at the intruder. But the terrifying ambush threat turns out to be Lady Yoon Seo. Honestly, that defensive catch is quite impressive. The composed silver-haired girl simply grabs the airborne tiger mid-pounce with practiced ease. This leaves the feisty young master dangling helplessly in complete, flustered embarrassment, panicking that the aggressive furball is genuinely frightening their guest. Soya quickly scoops the stunned tiger back into her arms. She gently chides her little bodyguard. She insists he apologize directly to Seo rather than fussing over her own safety. Brushing off her startled gasp, the elegant silver tiger easily forgives the rough, chaotic greeting. Dusting off her robes, Seo politely admits she couldn't help but eavesdrop on their secret conversation. Dropping her gaze, Soya softly confesses her dilemma. She desperately wants to make a proper farewell gift for Hyun, but assumes her painted stones will only be rejected. Hearing her hesitation, the jealous white cub immediately throws a tantrum. "What? You're giving my brother another gift?" he squalls, demanding she ignore him completely. Completely ignoring the squirming furball's loud complaints, Seo leans in with the perfect solution. She reveals that the famously stoic second young master actually harbors a delicate passion for flower arranging. "How about the sky flower?" she suggests, describing a rare blue blossom found only on Horim Mountain. Soya's face lights up with renewed, radiant hope. She beams at Seo, deeply grateful for the perfect inside scoop on her intimidating brother. Hearing her bold new plan, Seo gently asks if the little girl really intends to climb the rugged Horim Mountain for a flower. Since it's her very first time traversing wild terrain, Soya plans to seek official permission from the palace elders. Refusing to be left behind, the fiercely loyal white tiger cub enthusiastically volunteers as her personal guide, bounding across the grass to secure their travel pass right this second. Before the eager girl can hurry after her furry escort, Seo softly calls her back to present a beautifully crafted scent sachet. Honestly, it's so refreshing to see someone actually treat this sweet kid with genuine warmth. She offers the fragrant pink pouch as a thoughtful return gift for the handmade fox talisman, leaving the discarded princess beaming with wonder at the unexpected kindness. Their sweet afternoon farewell is interrupted by a booming voice calling for the clan's favorite fluffball, sending Soya scurrying toward the massive paws at the exit. Left alone in the rustling autumn breeze, Seo silently watches the tiny girl vanish through the heavy gates. A quiet, unreadable shadow settles over her usually composed face. Does she already see the dangerous political storm brewing around this fragile human, As the first light of dawn washes over the tranquil courtyards of the White Tiger Palace, the youngest residents are still blissfully lost in dreamland. Little Soya is curled up peacefully, hugging her favorite striped plushie tight. Meanwhile, the wildly energetic Yule is already defying gravity in his sleep, completely upside down and snoring away. But not everyone is resting. The composed second son, Hyun, steps out into the cool morning air to find his father already preparing to depart. "You're up early, Hyun," the patriarch greets him. Despite the warm smile, the boy's brow furrows with quiet concern over the long day ahead. Gently resting a large hand on the boy's silver hair, his father reassures him that he won't be out too late. He asks his son to watch over their home while he and the eldest brother handle clan business. Never missing a chance to prove his reliability, the young lord instantly puffs up with fierce determination. He promises to keep everything perfectly safe. Watching the earnest exchange, the aide softly notes that the second son always looks his absolute happiest around his father. But the famously fearsome clan leader just chuckles. He shakes his head at the courtyard gates. "You think so? I'm not so sure about that. Lately, he seems far more interested in fluffball than in me," the patriarch muses playfully. The aide blinks in utter confusion. Isn't little Yule the one entirely obsessed with their adorable new guest? Honestly, I'd be confused too. The second brother always acts so aloof. With a knowing gleam in his eye, the father simply replies, "There are things only a parent can see." He's keenly aware of his son's true nature. While Hyun acts incredibly sharp and guarded on the outside, the boy is wonderfully sensitive underneath. Whenever Soya is around, he pretends to ignore her while secretly tracking her every move. Does the stoic boy already care for their discarded little guest? The patriarch certainly thinks so. Flashing a confident smirk into the morning light, he predicts that this gentle, unassuming cotton ball might be exactly what's needed. She is going to completely melt away his son's prickly defenses. Inside the cozy dressing rooms of the White Tiger Palace, our little discarded princess is being thoroughly spoiled. The devoted Yeonjong proudly presents a beautifully crafted, tiger-shaped lunchbox for the long journey ahead. Naturally, Soya's bright pink eyes sparkle with utter amazement at the delicious masterpiece. But the cheerful morning quickly shifts into a tearful farewell hug. Due to sudden shifting clan duties for the upcoming mountain festival, a devastated Yeonjong is forced to remain behind to guard the palace. She is so terribly anxious about letting the tiny girl out of her sight that she actually begs to postpone the entire trip. It is wonderfully chaotic. Suri, the cool-headed escort stepping in for the day, can only laugh softly at the dramatic display. To ensure her safety on the rugged mountain trails, Suri reveals a stunning blue jewel. Kneeling gracefully, the escort ties the wind orb to her delicate robes, promising that the clan's treasured artifact will lend strength to her fragile legs. When the humble impostor nervously hesitates to accept such a priceless item, Suri flashes a warm smile. She insists they simply consider it repayment for the stone charm. Pledging to return safely before sunset, our little heroine finally heads out. "Fluffball, good morning." A booming voice instantly shatters the quiet farewells. Young Master Yule bursts into the courtyard, practically vibrating with wild excitement to show off his mountain. After Yeonjong issues strict orders to carry their precious guest at the slightest sign of fatigue, the trio embarks. The lush, sun-dappled forest of Horim Mountain welcomes them with cooling morning breezes. Suri checks in constantly, but true to the wind orb's protective magic, Soya hasn't felt a single ache in her delicate legs. And what about the fiercely energetic Yule? He has already shifted into his fluffy tiger form, happily prancing ahead up the dirt path. Honestly, I'd be entirely overwhelmed too. How long until this family's relentless affection completely fixes her broken heart? The rugged mountain trail suddenly opens into a breathtaking meadow, blanketed in vibrant, sunlit wildflowers. The sheer, overwhelming beauty leaves little Soya completely speechless. Meanwhile, tiger form Yule wildly bounces ahead through the colorful brush, eagerly calling for his precious fluffball to hurry up and join the fun. Spotting a familiar petal shape in the grass, the tiny girl consults her sketched notes. She excitedly points out a rare blue sky flower blooming brightly among the weeds. But before they can properly examine the precious medicinal specimen, Their chaotic young master simply leans down. He takes a massive bite. Swallowing the delicate bloom whole, Yule looks terribly pleased with his afternoon snack. Rather than scolding his terrible manners, Soya's face lights up with bright relief. If it is safe to eat, it truly is the medicinal herb she needs. So she carefully digs up another plant while Suri warmly praises her gentle touch. The amused escort teases that their guest is far better behaved than a certain hungry cub. But as Yule growls in protest, a sudden chill ripples through the warm air. Soya sharply turns her head toward the dense trees. "Who's there?" she murmurs, completely certain that a dark silhouette is watching them from the shadows. Does a hidden danger lurk on this peaceful mountain? Staring into the silent forest, she waits for another sound. When the ominous rustling finally stops, the uneasy girl brushes the eerie feeling off as her own imagination. Later, the children burn off their delicious packed lunch with a lively foot race. Having miraculously lost to the fragile girl, Yule is subjected to a humiliating penalty. A bright yellow flower crown. The proud third son of the White Tiger clan blushes furiously under the woven blooms. I have to admit, it perfectly suits his fluffy ears. Desperate to reclaim his fierce dignity, the flustered young master demands a game of hide and seek. He vows to make her wear the ridiculous crown next. Soya cheerfully agrees to close her eyes and count to 10. She remains entirely unaware of the mysterious gaze still tracking her every move from the deep woods. Soya leans against a towering oak, happily counting down the seconds for their game. But as she reaches 5, a sudden groan breaks her focus. She peeks around the thick trunk to find Suri clutching her stomach in obvious distress. The poor escort's stomach gives a fierce, embarrassing rumble. Deeply apologetic, Suri insists she cannot ruin this precious outing just because she feels ill. The worried little girl immediately urges her to head down to the palace. Sweating nervously, Suri promises to sprint home, but issues strict orders for their fragile guest to stick close to the young master. In a massive gust of wind, the escort shifts into a magnificent blue beast and vanishes down the dirt trail. Left alone in the sunlit meadow, Soya stares after her in absolute awe. Suri is impossibly fast even without the wind orb. Shaking off her amazement, the tiny girl turns back toward the dense trees. She completely forgot she was supposed to be seeking. "Young master?" she calls out, stepping into the shaded brush. A low, guttural snarl instantly freezes the blood in her veins. This is not a fluffy silver tiger. 2 massive, drooling wolves emerge from the shadows, their feral red eyes locked directly on her. But how is this possible? The palace maids swore the mountain's beasts never attacked people. Clenching her trembling hands around her protective charm, absolute terror washes over the abandoned impostor. The wild monsters bare their jagged fangs, inching closer with every heavy breath. Where is her fiercely protective new brother? She has to run. The massive, red-eyed wolves bare their fangs, saliva dripping as they prepare to pounce. Soya's first instinct is to flee toward the palace, the maid's frantic command to protect the youngest young master ringing in her ears. But panic quickly gives way to selfless protectiveness. If she leads these beasts back, they might harm the little boy. Clutching the heavy pendant, resting against her chest, a spark of hope pierces her terror. Unlike all those other times she was left totally defenseless, today she has the wind orb Lady Sanho gifted her. Praying its magic will activate, Soya turns on her heel and sprints deeper into the dark forest, the wolves thundering right behind her. Her small legs pump furiously, lungs burning with every single desperate gasp. The terrifying, wet snap of predatory jaws echoes entirely too close to her heels. Seriously, I don't know how she hasn't fainted yet. The chase sends a fresh surge of adrenaline through her tiny frame, and she doesn't dare look back. Spotting a massive, moss-covered boulder rising from the forest floor up ahead, a daring escape plan forms. If she can just climb up there, those monsters definitely won't be able to follow. Channeling the orb's mysterious power, Soya takes a desperate leap, hauling her exhausted body over the rocky edge to safety. Catching her breath, the little girl peers over the rim and sighs in sweet relief. Just as she calculated, the height is too much for them. But her triumph quickly shifts into deep confusion. The ferocious predators are suddenly whining and cowering in the grass below, shaking with fear as they back away. What are they so terrified of? Before she can piece the bizarre mystery together, a deep, ominous rumble vibrates right beneath her palms. The entire ground is shaking. With a startled yelp, the surface heaves upward, throwing Soya completely off balance. She tumbles backward through the air, landing hard in the dirt. Staring up, a horrifying realization crashes down. That massive thing she climbed is definitely not a rock. Looking up from the dirt, absolute terror floods her veins. A towering, shadowy mass looms right over her tiny frame, its sheer size completely blocking out the sun. She tells herself she has to run, but her trembling legs absolutely refuse to move. Just as the massive demonic beast leans closer, sticky black sludge dripping from its featureless face, its glowing blue eyes lock onto hers. But instead of attacking, the terrifying creature suddenly begins to melt into a bubbling puddle, leaving her entirely bewildered. With a soft pop, the intimidating sludge reshapes itself into a tiny, round bird. Soya stares in disbelief at the little creature hopping through the grass. Wait, is it just her imagination? Or does that chubby dark bird look exactly like her own secret cotton ball form? Before she can even process the uncanny resemblance, the little bird collapses in a puddle of black goo once again. What in the world is it doing now? A pair of dark, furry ears twitches as the mysterious slime bubbles up into an entirely new shape. The sticky mass morphs into an adorable black tiger cub, a familiar blue bandana neatly tied around its front paw. Soya shrinks back against a tree trunk, her heart pounding wildly as the little beast boldly trots right up to her frozen feet. I honestly expected it to bare its fangs, but the tiny tiger just tilts its head with a soft squeak. It stares up at her with huge, sparkling eyes, a tiny pink tongue poking out in the most harmless, endearing way possible. All her lingering fear evaporates into sheer confusion. Instead of a bloodthirsty monster hungry for a snack, this supposedly terrifying demonic beast happily flops right onto its back. It wiggles around in the soft grass, eagerly exposing its fluffy belly for scratches. Tentatively, Soya realizes this tiny creature truly means her no harm. She softly apologizes for assuming the worst, and the adorable tiger happily shakes its head, completely forgiving her. Spotting tiny slime tracks retreating into the dark woods, a sudden realization clicks into place. This little shapeshifter wasn't trying to eat her at all. It was actually chasing off those vicious wolves to keep her safe. Kneeling in the soft grass, she sincerely thanks her unlikely savior. The cub beams with pride, puffing its chest out, but Soya is still incredibly puzzled. How did it perfectly mimic her own hidden cotton ball form earlier? Does this strange companion possess rare magic? Staring at the creature, dark legends surface in her memory. 8 years ago, the treacherous Black Tortoise clan allied with an ancient evil. They unleashed terrifying demonic beasts from the tainted northern lands, reducing villages to ash and throwing the continent into chaos. To stop the slaughter, the empire declared a massive war. The greatest warriors from every prominent family were drafted. Even her eldest brother from the Vermilion Bird clan and the eldest young master of the White Tigers were called to the blood-soaked front lines. The history books always painted these demonic entities as vile, ruthless monsters that must be destroyed on sight without hesitation. Yet, gazing down at the bright-eyed cub sitting patiently at her feet, she just can't see any malice. Seriously, how could anyone look at that sweet face and scream monster? Gently introducing herself, the little girl asks the stray how it ended up wandering so far alone, but her warm smile quickly fades into genuine worry. Leaning in, she warns the clueless creature that staying in this territory is incredibly risky. A painful memory flashes through her mind, her own family throwing her to the floor, condemning her as a wicked fake. Tears well up in her pink eyes. Her voice trembles as she warns that people might mistake the cub for an evil beast, projecting her tragic abandonment onto the innocent creature. As a single heavy tear slides down her cheek, a soft scratching sound breaks the tense silence. The tiny tiger extends a fuzzy paw, clumsily carving a word into the dark dirt. Reading the messy letters, Soya gasps in utter disbelief. This supposed monster can actually write. She gently asks if Siorio is its name, and the adorable cub nods with overwhelming pride. Her heavy heart instantly lightens at the sweet gesture. Smiling warmly, the little girl officially declares them friends. I honestly can't handle how wholesome this unlikely duo is. But her tender moment with Siorio is cut incredibly short. Glancing toward the colorful evening sky, a fresh wave of anxiety hits her. She promised the worried maids she would return before sunset. Meanwhile, back at the sprawling palace, a young girl named Sio respectfully greets the silver-haired young master. He cheerfully returns the polite greeting, but casually uses the completely wrong name. When Sio nervously corrects his mistake, his friendly demeanor totally vanishes. He coldly instructs her to maintain strict, formal boundaries so vicious rumors don't spread about her having hidden, greedy ambitions. Sio quickly bows her head in quiet submission, respectfully accepting the abrupt, harsh boundary. As they sit down for evening tea, the young master stares blankly into his warm cup, his mind clearly a million miles away. A specific, deeply hurt expression keeps replaying in his memories. He silently wonders if he should have been just a little bit kinder during their last bitter encounter. Gazing out the open window toward the quiet courtyard, a sharp, chilling realization hits his chest. He hasn't seen that familiar face around the massive estate all day. Jumping frantically from his seat, Sio watches in total confusion as sheer panic washes over his pale features. A terrifying, guilt-ridden question violently echoes in his racing mind. Did his thoughtless, cruel words actually drive them to run away? Racing down the bright estate corridors, Yule completely ignores his panting attendants' confused questions. He has not seen their precious little guest all day, and his anxiety is rapidly spiking. Where on earth could she be? The tiny girl normally never misses her routine strolls around the gardens. A heavy, sickening knot of guilt settles deep in his chest. She skipped both her morning walk and afternoon playtime. Bursting through the heavy doors of the servant quarters, the young silver-haired boy interrupts the startled maids to demand Soya's immediate whereabouts. He has to find her right now. Head maid Yeon Jong calmly explains that the girl went on a simple daytime outing to Horim Mountain. Just as she insists the local trails are perfectly safe, the door slides open. Suri, the very attendant assigned to closely escort the children, stumbles into the room. Suri sheepishly confesses she got a stomachache and made the kids promise to stick close together. Seriously, who is running the security in this supposedly fearsome clan? Outraged, Yule spins on his heel. He completely tunes out the frantic apologies as he sprints back toward the outer courtyard. The older attendants finally catch up outside, desperately trying to soothe his escalating panic beneath the sunset sky. Their placating words instantly die in their throats. The youngest master is slowly trudging through the massive wooden gates. His shoulders slump in utter defeat, and he is entirely alone. Yule stops dead in his tracks, a chill washing over him. Before he can even demand a proper explanation, his little brother looks up with a terribly pale, empty expression. The boy quietly asks if Yule has seen their fluffy companion wandering around the main estate. Why would he ever ask that? Weren't they supposed to stick closely together? Quivering in absolute terror, the youngest boy bites his thumb while tears well up in his eyes. He openly voices the exact horrifying nightmare Yule has been dreading all afternoon. I think I lost Fluffball. Tears streaming down his chubby cheeks, the youngest boy finally explains exactly how he lost her. He simply dozed off while playing hide-and-seek. When he woke up, both their careless attendant and their precious Fluffball had vanished without a trace. Yule absolutely loses his temper. What did you do right crying about it? He snaps at his little brother. His harsh tone masks a crushing, unbearable guilt. If he hadn't driven her away with his own petty anger earlier, this nightmare would never have happened. Night falls rapidly over the dense canopy of Horim Mountain, swallowing the desperate search party in eerie shadows. The maids frantically try to comfort the trembling boys, insisting the local beasts are perfectly gentle, and the tiny girl merely wandered off the main trail. But Yule knows something is terribly wrong. Peering into the murky woods, a horrifying realization chills his blood. He cannot pick up even a faint trace of Soya's scent. It is as if the mountain itself is deliberately blocking her from being found. Does someone else have her? Suddenly, a massive shadow erupts overhead. The fearsome white tiger patriarch leaps into the fray in his magnificent beast form. I can't blame him for not trusting his incompetent staff right now. Dismissing the useless search party with a low growl, The massive tiger bounds into the darkness entirely alone to reclaim their lost cotton ball. Miles away in the freezing woods, Soya huddles against a thick tree trunk with her fluffy little demon cub. She stubbornly refuses to panic just yet. After all, her adoptive family possesses legendary predatory senses. Surely one of her fierce new brothers will sniff her out any minute now, right? A violent shiver interrupts her hopeful thoughts. Seeking a shred of warmth, the tiny girl remembers the protective talisman her older brother specifically handed her. Her small fingers grasp at empty air. The enchanted pouch lies broken on the dirt, its magical scent entirely severed. She really is completely alone. Huddled against the enormous roots, the tiny girl pulls her knees to her chest, shivering uncontrollably as the mountain air turns biting. Sensing her distress, the little demon cub presses his furry body against her side. Soya gently gathers the squished feline into her arms, desperate to share whatever fragile warmth they have left. But the fluffy companion suddenly wriggles free, darting away into the pitch-black woods. What is he doing? Her heart drops as she watches his tiny cyst vanish into the thick fog, leaving her completely alone beneath the towering canopy. Heavy rustling sounds echo from the darkness. A moment later, the little tiger proudly trots back onto the trail. Clamped firmly in his jaws is a massive, slightly damp tropical leaf. He drags the oversized foliage right to her feet, tumbling over his own paws in his eagerness to help. Is he seriously trying to build her a blanket? Touched beyond words, Soya drapes the giant leaf over her small shoulders like a makeshift cape. A soft, genuine smile breaks through her exhaustion as she looks down at the proud little beast. Honestly, this demonic fluffball is far sweeter than most people she knows. She whispers a heartfelt thank you into the freezing night. The cub playfully tilts his head, basking in her quiet praise. Soya breathes a deep sigh of relief, confessing that she would have been absolutely terrified if she had to face this dark, endless forest completely alone. But her fleeting comfort quickly fades as the reality of her situation sinks back in. She completely failed to keep her promise to the head maid about returning before sunset. Even worse, she clutches her empty gathering pouch, devastated that she won't be able to give the second young master the pretty flower she wanted to find. Just as she hangs her head in quiet defeat, a sudden, heavy thud echoes through the trees behind her. Soya freezes in absolute terror. Her eyes widen as she stares into the pitch-black darkness. Is it a monster, or did the search party finally find her? Whirling around, Soya peers into the suffocating darkness, desperately praying it isn't another hungry beast. At her feet, the tiny demon cub bravely bares his fangs, roaring at the shifting shadows. High above them, the mountain's invisible magical barrier suddenly shatters like fragile glass. I can't even imagine the sheer power it takes to break that, but the little girl is entirely focused on the rhythmic thuds approaching through the underbrush. Her blood runs icy cold. Those are not animal paws, they are undeniably the heavy footsteps of a person. Could it be the White Tiger search party finally breaking through to rescue her? Her desperate hope dies in a heartbeat. A dark figure erupts from the dense tree line. It is a masked assassin, already raising a gleaming, deadly blade straight toward her tiny frame. No, I don't want to die. Squeezing her eyes tightly shut, the helpless girl shrinks back against the massive roots. She braces for the agonizing strike, fully expecting this freezing forest to be her grave. Soya, a frantic voice suddenly shatters the deadly silence. She snaps her tear-filled eyes open. A familiar silver-haired blur has already rushed to her side. Yule throws his arms around her trembling shoulders, sweeping the bewildered girl into a desperate, crushing embrace. "Little young master?" she whispers, completely stunned. The icy knot of terror finally dissolves in her chest. The normally arrogant boy has braved the pitch-black woods just to find her. He clings to her fragile body, holding on as if he will never let her out of his sight again. Soya blinks in stunned silence as Yule clings to her in the dense, moonlit woods. She fully expects a harsh scolding for running off. Instead, she feels the boy shaking with raw panic against her shoulder. He is absolutely terrified. What is she supposed to do with such genuine fear? A tiny striped cotton ball watches their reunion from the grass, letting out a soft, confused whine. Pulling back slightly, Yule checks her over with freezing cold hands. He quickly apologizes for disappearing on her earlier. Soya just stares up at his panicked face, completely bewildered by his priorities. He grips her small fingers tightly, his expression crumpling into heavy guilt. I was really worried, Soya, he confesses. It wasn't her fault for getting lost. He was the one who wandered around uselessly, while she was alone in these dangerous mountains. Stripping off his outer robe, he drapes it carefully around her shoulders, cursing himself for arriving too late. The journey back is steady, with the little tiger padding faithfully behind them. Soya insists she can walk, but Yul stubbornly carries her on his back to keep her safe from the rough terrain. Resting her chin on his shoulder, Soya realizes how comforting his heat is. It feels incredibly familiar. Honestly, it reminds her exactly of Circean. As they walk, Yul explains that a strange, invisible barrier delayed his rescue. A sudden, sharp tug on his robe makes him glance down. The little cub is fiercely biting the fabric. Yul's blue eyes narrow in sudden suspicion. Wait a second. Could this weird little creature be the one who trapped Soya in the first place? Before Yul can shake the furry suspect away, Soya panics. She quickly defends the tiny creature, blurting out that it actually saved her when wild animals attacked. Yul freezes mid-step. Seriously, if she isn't careful, her new family might just burn this entire mountain down. The wild beasts of Horam Mountain dared to go after his precious little sister. Soya shrinks against Yul's back, bracing herself for a harsh scolding. She completely abandoned her bodyguard's orders to stay close to him. Instead of yelling, the young master gently hoists her higher, frantically checking her over for injuries. Why is he only worried about whether she was bitten? She quickly assures him she used a magical wind orb to escape unharmed, but his deep concern doesn't fade. As she rests against his shoulder, Soya suddenly notices his torn, dirt-stained sleeve. Wait, did he actually get hurt while searching the dangerous mountains for her? A heavy wave of guilt washes over the little girl. A soft, pathetic whine interrupts their quiet moment. Yul glances back with a sharp, annoyed glare at the little tiger cub trailing faithfully behind them. You just know he wants to kick the tiny furball into the brush. Luckily, he reluctantly agrees to leave the strange creature alone since Soya insists it helped her survive. Clearing his throat, Yul suddenly brings up their fight from yesterday. He clumsily admits he never threw away her handmade stone charm. In fact, he kept it. He stammers a frantic defense. Blaming his foolish friends, he swears he didn't know it was a real gift. But his defensive bluster quickly melts into raw, genuine shame. Sighing softly into the cool night air, Yul finally drops the petty excuses. He knows she must have felt incredibly lonely arriving in this unfamiliar clan territory, yet he completely ignored her sincerity and treated her like a nuisance. Hanging his head, he quietly asks if she might ever forgive his terrible behavior. How could she possibly stay mad at a brother like this? Soya squeezes him tightly, a bright smile wiping away her tears. She admits she was sad yesterday, but all is forgiven now. After all, he just risked his own safety rushing into the dark woods to rescue her. Yul's eyes widen at her gentle gratitude, before softening into a warm, resolute smile. Next time, he promises to run to her side even faster. As the towering estate finally comes into view, Yul breaks the comfortable silence. In a soft, hesitant voice, he asks if she might start calling him older brother instead of the formal young master. He desperately wants to bridge the distance between them. They are greeted in the main courtyard by the white tiger patriarch, who has finally returned. Praising his clan for holding down the fort, the tall leader's eyes soften at the sight of the sleeping girl. He steps forward. Gently, he offers to take the heavy fluffball off Yul's tired shoulders, but as Soya nuzzles trustingly against Yul's neck, a proud blush spreads across the boy's bruised cheeks. For the first time, Yul stubbornly refuses the formidable patriarch. Holding Soya securely, he insists on carrying his little sister to her room himself. The clan leader pauses. He is slightly stunned by the boy's sudden defiance, before a warm smile touches his lips. It seems the two have grown incredibly close while he was away. He watches fondly as Yul marches up the stone steps. But the patriarch's peaceful smile vanishes the moment his sharp gaze lands on the ground. A tiny, striped cotton ball is padding faithfully behind the children. His eyes narrow in dark, instant suspicion. Honestly, he looks ready to punt the poor thing. Why on earth is that specific creature wandering around inside his estate? Meanwhile, a pair of furious purple eyes watches the touching family reunion from the shadows. A young clan girl grips the sliding door, biting her thumb in bitter jealousy. She has spent months waiting for the perfect opportunity to be officially adopted and claim control of the Western Wing. Since the other tiger candidates were either foolish or uninterested, her victory was supposed to be a sure thing. Now, this completely ordinary brat has ruined everything. How dare an outsider who isn't even a tiger steal the patriarch's precious attention? Panic claws at her chest as she watches Yule fiercely protect the sleeping girl. If Lord Saiyan actually adopts this pathetic impostor, her own grand future will be completely destroyed. Just how far is she willing to go to eliminate her new competition? Deep inside the estate, the jealous girl's dark plotting is abruptly interrupted by a mocking voice. "Things don't seem to be going your way, miss." A masked assassin kneels gracefully on her floor. He points out a glaring flaw in her ambush. The wild beasts of Horim Mountain never attack humans unprovoked. Panicking as clan members walk past her room, she forcefully slams the sliding doors shut. She whirls on him in a furious, desperate whisper. The special scent sachet he provided was supposed to eliminate her rival without a trace. Instead, her trap only made the imposter more cherished. This is a total disaster. She glares across the dimly lit room, absolutely terrified that this completely ordinary outsider will permanently steal her promised adoption spot. The masked man watches her panic with mild amusement, casually dismissing her frantic worries. A strange variable merely interfered. "I wouldn't trust a guy who sneaks through windows, but she is incredibly desperate." His dark eyes curve into a dangerous, knowing smile behind his mask. "I happen to know that child's weakness," he whispers. The bitter candidate's fists tremble against her silk skirt, and her eyes light up with a sinister curiosity. What kind of ruinous secret could destroy the patriarch's new favorite? Waking up in her soft, warm bed, Ye is completely stunned to realize the entire household was sick with worry. The servants fuss over the little girl, immensely relieved she survived the freezing, pitch-black night on Mount Horim. They couldn't bear the thought of her shivering all alone. Instead of soaking in the newfound comfort, the discarded impostor immediately bows her head. "I'm sorry for making you worry," she whispers. The loyal staff quickly step in, vehemently insisting that she has absolutely nothing to be sorry for. A sudden, clumsy rustle from the garden outside her window interrupts the sweet morning moment. It's the youngest young master awkwardly peeking inside. He stammers that he wasn't spying. He just wanted to check on her. Before she can even reply, the young boy suddenly bursts into heavy, racking tears. His overwhelming guilt spills out as he sobs, calling himself a complete idiot for failing to protect his precious fluffball out on the dangerous mountain. Does he finally realize how much he actually cares? Overwhelmed by his own messy, tangled emotions, the boy literally bursts into a tiny, wailing white tiger cub and tumbles right off the wooden windowsill. It's both chaotic and undeniably adorable. Soya leans out to warmly comfort the crying furball, gently promising him she made it back entirely safe. Just then, an older voice dryly suggests the boy deserves a bit more scolding. Hearing that, the young master quickly transforms back, flashing a proud, teary smile. Later, sitting together over a quiet cup of tea, the real reason for his dangerous trek finally comes to light. He climbed all the way up that terrifying mountain just to pick her favorite blue sky flowers. Bashfully, he apologizes for his past jealousy, deeply ashamed of his earlier cruelty. Seeking a fresh start, he eagerly reminds her of the special promise they made yesterday. He wants a new title. Blushing softly, Soya gives him exactly what he wants, nervously whispering, "Yes, brother, honestly, I'm just melting over how fiercely this clan is claiming her." But that tender tea time is completely derailed when the youngest young Posterstrand throws a massive wailing tantrum right on the floor. Flailing his fluffy tiger paws, he fiercely demands to be called her brother too. Unamused, Yule ruthlessly shuts the little furball down, physically pushing him away. "How can you be her brother when you couldn't even protect her?" he scolds. Watching them bicker so comfortably, Soya can't help but let out a soft, relieved giggle. She finally understands that Yule's harsh words aren't born of actual hatred, but a fiercely protective concern. As the tiny tiger whines about Yule being a big meanie, the silver-haired boy flushes a deep red, desperately trying to quiet him down. Honestly, I could watch these powerful clan members fight over her affection all day long. When Soya softly asks about the mysterious dark cub that guarded her in the freezing woods, Yul admits the creature simply vanished on their way back. Will they ever cross paths again? Deep down, Soya secretly hopes the little demonic beast stays safely hidden up on the mountain, far away from cruel humans who might blindly hunt it down. The playful, warm mood suddenly turns incredibly heavy. Yul leans forward, his expression dead serious, and asks if anyone else knew about her trip to Mount Horim. Something about yesterday's near tragedy just doesn't add up. The normally docile mountain beasts were unusually violent, and when he desperately tried to track her, Soya's scent had been completely erased. He asks if anyone handed her anything suspicious before the trip, and a chilling realization instantly hits the little girl. The delicate sachet. It was a parting gift from her haughty older sister back in the Vermilion Bird clan. That older girl's sweet smiles masked a bitter, festering jealousy over a simple room assignment. Was that fragrant little pouch actually designed to drive the wild beasts mad? Sitting entirely alone on the quiet courtyard steps, the discarded daughter hesitates. Should she really burden her fiercely protective new family with such a toxic secret? Startled from her heavy, lingering thoughts about the sachet, Soya turns to see Orang rushing up the steps to check on her. The spirited little girl immediately starts badmouthing the youngest master, loudly calling him a total idiot for abandoning someone so small and weak. But the gentle cotton ball softly defends him. She asks her new friend not to hate the boy too much, adding with quiet resignation that she will be leaving soon anyway. When she explains she needs to clear out her room for the new lady, Orang gasps in utter shock. Grabbing her hands, the girl boldly declares, "Then come live with me." Eagerly pitching the brown tiger estate, Orang promises a massive lake where they can swim and fish all day. More importantly, she swears she would never fall asleep and leave her behind on a dangerous mountain. I love how fiercely this tiny friend vows to protect our precious girl from any bullies. Deeply moved by the sweet unexpected offer, Soya gives a shy nod of thanks. But their tender conversation is cut short when an elegant palanquin is carried into the sunny courtyard. Stepping out is Hyuk-sahi, a tiny representative from the Black Tiger clan. Despite her grand entrance, the dark-haired girl looks downright miserable. Leaning in to gossip, Orang happily whispers the juicy reason behind her foul mood. Sahe has a massive crush on Lord Gaia, meaning that if she were actually adopted, her beloved crush would legally become her brother. That romantic tragedy perfectly explains why another haughty candidate, Yoon Seo, is acting so incredibly arrogant. Since neither of the other girls truly wants to join the White Tiger's direct bloodline, Seo feels practically guaranteed to take over Soya's room in the West Wing. The discarded imposter simply lowers her eyes, quietly absorbing the complicated reality of these powerful clan politics. Completely oblivious to the heavy mood, Orang cheerfully offers to teach her fragile new friend some proper self-defense. "You can't survive on cuteness alone," she insists. Meanwhile, a familiar, striped, dark tail wags excitedly from behind a nearby wooden pillar. Is her mysterious mountain savior already tracking her down? Catching a glimpse of that familiar striped tail, Soya abruptly jumps up from the steps. Leaving a confused Orang behind, she hurriedly excuses herself and dashes across the sunny courtyard. She just has to make sure her eyes aren't playing tricks on her. Rounding a quiet corner, she finds her fluffy dark savior happily waiting for her. Naming the joyful little cub Seolio, the frantic girl drops to her knees and desperately tries to shoo the whining beast back up the mountain. This powerful estate is simply too dangerous for a wild creature, but it's already too late. A deep voice suddenly remarks on her new friend, and the imposing White Tiger patriarch steps right into view. What if the powerful clan leader mistakes her precious savior for an evil, trespassing monster? Terrified that this ruthless lord might brutally punish the tiny beast, Soya throws herself over the dark furball in a protective hug. I just love how brave she is. And that's where the story is currently at. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because I'll be posting new chapters as soon as they come out. See you in the next one.